33 ancient forbidden discoveries that still shock experts. Ashes of a hidden age. Night settles over the old valley like a slow, thoughtful breath, the kind that seems to pause before touching the earth. And in that breath, the ruins wait silent, patient, almost aware, wrapped in a thin, whispering layer of grey. They found the ashes by accident. A shallow sweep of wind had brushed aside enough soil to reveal the rim of an ancient hearth, half buried, half forgotten. At first glance it seemed ordinary, but under lantern light, something felt wrong. The ash was too fine, too smooth, too cold, almost like powdered moonstone rather than the burnt remains of wood. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if remembering a fire that once glowed with a strange purpose. The early excavation report, written in 1907 by historian Elwood Carr, noted that the hearth's shape resembled Bronze Age designs, yet its construction was far older. Some of the stones bore thin, concentric carvings, delicate spirals that caught the lantern glow and sent it slipping across their surfaces like water. Carr tried to compare them to known cultural marks, but nothing matched. Even now, scholars still debate whether these spirals were decorative, or a language meant to be read by flame rather than eyes. As we drift deeper into the quiet, the air takes on a mineral sharpness, like the scent of old tablets stored in a dark archive. The ground softens underfoot, swallowing each step with a soundless hush. People who camp here often describe the same sensation, the feeling that someone is listening beneath the soil, not malevolent, just watchful, resting, remembering. In the center of the hearth, beneath that peculiar ash, they found something small, a figurine smooth obsidian, shaped into a bird with folded wings, its head lifted toward some imagined dawn. The piece was no longer than a finger, yet crafted with such precision that its edges still catch moonlight like a thin blade. One fringe antiquarian insisted the bird represented a messenger spirit, carried into the fire to seal a forgotten ritual. Most dismissed the idea with a gentle sigh, but no one could explain why the figurine's surface held an unexpected warmth, even in the cold night air. The stones around the hearth formed deliberate arcs like ripples carved into time rather than water. Some arcs were broken, but their pattern remained clear enough to suggest a ritual circle or a blueprint, a faint one, as though someone had tried to erase it, but not quite succeeded. Scholars still debate whether the site was a sanctuary, a burial place, or something stranger, perhaps an early attempt to record knowledge in a form we've long forgotten how to read. There were no tools, no pottery, no bones, nothing that hinted at ordinary life. Only this quiet circle, sealed by ash that should not exist, on ground that seems untouched by centuries of weather. When a team returned in the 1970 seconds with newer instruments, they found the soil beneath the hearth unusually undisturbed, no root networks, no insect tunnels, no signs of natural settling, as if the earth itself had been compacted from below, pressed upward, held tight around something hidden. Standing there at dusk, the valley feels like a paused heartbeat. Shadows slip across the stones with slow, searching movements, as though tracing memories etched beneath the surface. The wind drifts softly over the excavation pit, catching a thin veil of ash and lifting it into the air. And for a moment, the particles hang there, twinkling faintly like tiny fading stars. One archaeologist, writing late at night in the camp journal, confessed he felt the ashes were not remnants of something destroyed, but the residue of something transformed. A chapter burned away, not by accident, but by intention. As we step back, the night deepens, the valley exhales, the air cools, and somewhere beneath the lowest layer of ash, the untouched soil seems to tremble, not with movement, but with patience, as if waiting for the next curious hand to brush aside just one more thin, grey veil. City of erased footsteps, the desert holds its secrets gently, as though afraid that too sudden a whisper might disturb the centuries sleeping just beneath its surface. And here, under a moon that drifts like a silver sentinel across the sky, lies the city that should never have been this perfect, this intact, this eerily untouched. Its discovery began with a collapsing dune, nothing more. A soft sigh of sand, a shifting of weight, and then the faint outline of a plaza emerged in the half-light. The first explorers approached slowly, lanterns trembling in their hands, expecting rubble, expecting ruin, but instead they found streets so clean, so precisely laid that one archaeologist confessed he felt as though the inhabitants had simply stepped away moments before, leaving the stone still warm beneath their feet. The city was surveyed officially in 1924, its plazas aligned with the quiet certainty of a place designed with purpose, not improvisation. The stone tiles fit together with a precision reminiscent of Roman craftsmanship, yet carbon dating consistently pushed the site far earlier, so early, in fact, that the idea began to bend the edges of accepted chronology. Some scholars suggested the desert winds had polished the stones to this deceptive perfection. Others, quieter but more uneasy, pointed out the joints were sealed tight, too tight for wind-blown sand to have shaped them. And then there were the footsteps, or rather, the haunting absence of them. No impressions, no wear, no scuff marks, not a single scratch on the stone pathways that should have been carved by centuries of daily life. Scholars still debate whether the city was ever truly lived in, or if it was built for a purpose that required presence but not habitation. A ceremonial maze, perhaps, a place where people visited without touching the ground, or a city meant only for the eyes of the sky above. As we drift slowly onward, you may feel the strangeness settling in like something watching from behind the dunes, tracing the old paths with invisible feet. The buildings tell their own story, or rather, the story they refuse to tell. Doorways carved without hinges, entrances shaped with gentle, ceremonial arcs, yet no signs that a single door ever hung there. Inside, the rooms are empty voids of stone without soot, without pottery, without the smallest trace of domestic life. It is as though the people who designed the city planned only its shell and never stepped inside their own creation. In the northeast quarter, researchers discovered a narrow lane lined with short columns, each carved with spiraling grooves that taper downward in a hypnotic rhythm. When lantern light passes over them, the grooves stretch the glow into thin ribbons, pulling it along the column's length, as though guiding the observer deeper into the city's heart. Some fringe theorists claim the carvings were designed to manipulate light ritualistic pathways, illuminated only by flame. Others argue it's coincidence. But even now, scholars still debate why every groove seems to point toward the plaza, toward the smooth, rectangular pit at its center. That pit, so perfectly shaped, so unnervingly plain, rests like an idea waiting to be understood. Too shallow for a well, too precise for erosion, too intentional to ignore. Its stone bears faint discoloration arranged in soft, circular patterns. The residue feels like the ghost of movement, perhaps the passage of many people, standing in a pattern no one can yet decipher. As we noted earlier when walking through the ashes of the hidden age, some places feel designed not for living but for remembering. And here, too, that impression thickens in the air. A city shaped like a memory someone wanted to preserve, but not share. At night, the wind drifts down the empty streets with a tone so gentle it resembles a hum, just a single note, sustained, as though the city itself is breathing. And as you stand in the plaza, the moon casting pale patterns across the flawless stone, something beneath the ground seems to respond, not movement, not sound. Just a shift, subtle enough to question whether it happened, but old enough to feel deliberate. Because in this quiet city without footsteps, the silence does not feel empty. It feels expectant. Library of carved stone. Night gathers softly around the mouth of the ravine, settling with the heavy calm of a place that has waited far too long to be seen again. Deeper within, beyond the reach of starlight or wind, lies a library that should not exist. A library carved entirely from stone, every shelf sculpted, every tablet etched, every corridor shaped with a patience that feels almost inhuman. It was found in fragments in the mid-1930s, when a team tracing ancient riverbeds followed a trail of collapsed rock into the hillside. What they expected was a natural cavern. What awaited them instead was a world built with purpose. The first chamber was a long hall, its walls lined with rows of stone slabs that resembled books arranged on a shelf. Each slab was carved so precisely that its edges still felt sharp beneath the fingertips, despite the centuries that had passed. The air inside was tightly still, so still that the flame of a torch barely trembled, as if the room itself protected every whisper of heat. Across those slabs ran lines of symbols so clean, so perfectly etched, that the explorers believed at first they were machine-made, yet the site dated to long before any known machinery capable of such precision. A mainstream researcher later compared the engravings to Proto-Elamite markings, but the resemblance dissolved the moment one looked closer. Some symbols echoed stars, some resembled waves, some were forms entirely unknown, as if shaped by hands that thought in patterns rather than words. Scholars still debate whether this was truly a library, whether its creators meant to preserve knowledge, or to hide it behind a script the world no longer knows how to read. Some even suggest that the symbols might not represent language at all, but memory moments pressed into stone the way a seal presses into wax. As we move gently through the chamber, the ceiling lowers, curving like the inside of a great stone ribcage. Every few meters, circular medallions interrupt the wall's intricate designs, carved so finely that a single pass of the lantern light sends shadows dancing almost like motion. One medallion appears to show a spiral constellation that no longer matches the current night sky. Another resembles a gathering of figures around a central flame. The explorers could not agree on what these scenes meant. Even now, scholars remain divided. As we noted in earlier discoveries, some sites seem crafted with silence in mind. Here, that silence becomes almost sacred. When you walk along the corridor, the sound of your footsteps feels muffled, absorbed instantly by the stone, as if the walls themselves are listening. At the far end of the hall rests a single raised platform. On it lies the only movable object ever found in the library, a round disc of dark, polished stone. When held, it feels heavier than it should, dense and cool, almost metallic. Around its surface run concentric circles, 7 of them each, filled with symbols more intricate than the ones on the walls. The 7th ring contains forms so delicate that even pointing a lantern at them casts shadows too fine to follow. Fringe theorists once claimed the disc was a memory key, designed to interpret the carvings on the shelves. Most experts dismissed this, yet none could explain why the disc fit perfectly into a shallow depression in the platform, as if waiting for someone who knew how to read it. Deeper inside the complex, the explorers found more chambers, some collapsed, some accessible. One held tall pillars covered from floor to ceiling in vertical lines of carvings. Another room contained nothing but a single stone seat positioned beneath a narrow shaft carved into the rock above. When moonlight strikes the shaft at a specific angle rare, fleeting, it travels straight down and illuminates the seat with a thin, silvery beam. The room feels suddenly alive when that happens, as though the very stone inhales. No one knows who built this place. No one knows why every part of it was crafted by carving rather than construction. Some believe it was a sanctuary for knowledge. Others think it was meant to protect a secret too heavy for the world above. But when the lantern light dims, and the carved shelves melt back into shadow, there is a moment, just one, where the darkness seems to rearrange itself, as though something within the stone remembers what was once written here, and wonders quietly if it is time to be read again. Tomb beneath a sleeping hill. The hill looks peaceful from a distance, nothing more than a soft rise in the landscape, brushed with quiet grass that ripples gently when the night wind drifts through. It seems harmless, almost comforting, the kind of place where shepherds might rest, or where the earth might simply cradle its own weight in silence. But beneath that calm curve lies a chamber that has waited longer than memory can stretch, sealed so perfectly that the air inside has not moved in thousands of years. Its discovery came in 1952, when a routine survey mapped the hill's outline and noticed something strange. The slope was unnaturally symmetrical, its angles too deliberate to be shaped by time alone. Ground-penetrating instruments of the era were crude, but they detected a hollow, large, spherical, unnervingly precise. The dig began hesitantly, with workers describing an odd heaviness in the air as they approached the center. Some said the ground felt warmer. Some claimed the wind went silent, as though listening. By the 3rd day, a slab of stone emerged beneath the soil, smooth, seamless, impossibly intact. No tool marks, no erosion, no sign that human hands had ever touched it. And yet, when brushed clean, it revealed a faint ring around its edge, like the lid of a vessel waiting to be lifted. It took weeks to open the tomb. When the massive stone finally shifted, a breath of cold, ancient air escaped, slipping over the explorer's hands like a sigh. Inside lay a chamber shaped like an inverted dome. The walls were polished to a dark, reflective sheen, curving inward until they met at a single point high above a point from which a thin trail of mineral deposits descended like frozen rain. On the floor, carved directly from the bedrock, rested a platform resembling a bed or altar. But the shape was ambiguous, as if designed for a form not quite human, and on that platform they found the figure. The skeleton was complete, yet unmistakably unusual. The limbs were long, too long, with joints that suggested a range of movement beyond normal human anatomy. The skull was narrow and elongated, the jaw delicate, the eye sockets wide and deep. A mainstream anthropologist cautiously suggested it might be a ritual deformation, an intentional shaping practiced by some ancient cultures. But even he admitted the proportions felt wrong, unforced, grown that way. Scholars still debate whether the being buried here was human adjacent, or something belonging to a lineage yet unrecorded. Some argue it may have been a revered ancestor, others whisper it might have been something feared, sealed away beneath a sleeping hill to prevent its return. Wrapped around the skeleton's ribcage was a band of metal, thin, flexible, etched with patterns so fine they shimmered under torchlight. The alloy, once tested, proved unusual, meteoric in origin, yet fused with minerals not commonly associated with celestial iron. A fringe theorist claimed it was a containment device, another suggested a ceremonial heart binding, but no inscription explained its purpose, just the silent glint of metal resting where a heart once beat. As we drift through the chamber, lantern light brushes the walls and reveals faint grooves, lines that spiral upward like the inside of a seashell, guiding the eye toward the apex above. Some believe these grooves were acoustic, designed to amplify chants or whispers during burial rites. Others think the spirals mimic celestial paths, echoes of constellations carved into the stone to guide the departed. Near the far wall, a discovery unsettled the excavation team. A small bowl, carved from obsidian, filled not with dust but with liquid, dark, thick, unmoving. Tests showed the liquid was ancient, yet unspoiled, as if preserved intentionally. When touched, it felt cold, almost oily, and reflected light in strange ripples, like a mirror disturbed by breath alone. Standing in that tomb, the silence feels different from other ruins, heavier, almost expectant, as though something behind the polished stone walls remembers a time when this hill was more than a hill, when it was a threshold, a boundary between the world above and a world the ancients did not name. And somewhere deeper, beneath the platform itself, the instruments detected yet another hollow, smaller, narrower, still sealed. A chamber within the chamber. What rests inside remains untouched. For now, machine before the stars. The mountains cradle the valley in a hush so deep, even the wind seems reluctant to disturb it. Here, where twilight lingers longer than it should, an odd glimmer once caught the eye of a shepherd passing through a glint of metal half buried in soil that had not been turned for centuries. No one expected the fragment to belong to anything remarkable. Yet when archaeologists arrived, lanterns bobbing softly in the fading light, they unearthed something that did not belong to any known age of human craft. It began with a single bronze gear, small, intricate, cut with precision unexpected for something found in sediment dating thousands of years before the earliest documented mechanical engineering. The artifact was discovered in 1961 near a cluster of prehistoric dwellings, long abandoned, long silent. At first, the team thought it might be a stray piece washed in by time or trade routes, but the gear's metal composition matched the surrounding earth, its patina ancient, its style utterly foreign. And then the soil gave way to more. Tiny gears, threaded rods, a circular plate with faint etchings, a bronze casing shaped like a box, no larger than a child's head, yet astonishingly complex in its internal design. The early sketches drew comparisons to the Antikythera mechanism, yet this find was far older, centuries older, if carbon sampling of the surrounding layers held true. Scholars still debate whether the age is accurate or if the artifact somehow sank into older sediment layers. Some argue for natural deposition, others point out the surrounding soil bore no sign of disturbance, suggesting the machine had rested there since the earliest days of settled life in the region. As we move closer, let the lantern light fall gently across its surfaces. The gears interlock like a constellation, each tooth shaped with uncanny accuracy, each component nestled into its neighbor, as though the maker understood not only metalwork, but astronomy, geometry, and the intimate language of motion. One plate bears an engraving, a spiral that mirrors the path of Venus, as tracked in early Babylonian star charts, but this artifact predates those records by centuries. A mainstream historian suggested it may represent a ritual symbol, not an astronomical path, yet the spacing of the lines is too mathematically consistent, too deliberate. The grooves deepen at points that correspond to synodic cycles, as if recording celestial rhythms with quiet devotion. Nearby, a circular dial was found, its rim lined with symbols that resemble neither letters nor numbers. Instead, they flow in looping forms, almost like phases of the moon interpreted as art. When the dial is turned, even now, the gears shift with smooth resistance, as though the machine has slept so well that time itself has not worn it down. A fringe theorist once proposed the device was a star calculator, built by a forgotten culture, an instrument for charting planetary motion. This was dismissed politely, but years later, computational modeling showed that if the gears were aligned in a certain configuration, the device could indeed approximate the positions of 3 visible planets across a span of years, not with perfect accuracy, but with intention, with understanding. As we noted earlier in The Silent City Without Footsteps, some ancient creations feel designed not for practical needs, but for meaning rituals carved into stone, or knowledge preserved in shapes rather than words. Here, too, that impression lingers. Surrounding the mechanism, archaeologists found faint inscriptions on nearby stones, dots arranged in clusters, thin lines connecting them, celestial patterns, perhaps, star maps turned into prayers. But the meaning remains hidden. Scholars still debate whether these markings form a language or simply a guide for someone who once knew how to assemble the machine. At dusk, when shadows stretch long across the valley floor, the metal fragments catch the fading sunlight in soft, coppery glints. From a distance, the pieces resemble fireflies caught in time, their glow frozen by earth and memory. And the most unsettling part? A hollow beneath the machine's resting place, detected only in recent years, suggests that the device was once part of something larger, a structure of gears and plates that extended downward into the soil, now collapsed or buried too deeply to reach. Something was here long before the stars were charted by history, something that measured time, or marked it, or waited for it. And what lies in the deeper chamber, still untouched, might be the part of the machine that once made the others move. Map of Forgotten Shores. The parchment was discovered folded inside a clay vessel, sealed so tightly that when the lid finally cracked open, the first breath of ancient air drifted out like a sigh from another age. The vessel came from a coastal dig in 1948, near a shoreline that had shifted countless times over the centuries. No one expected anything remarkable, perhaps a ledger or a simple trade record, yet when the fragile sheet was unrolled beneath the soft glow of lamplight, even the seasoned archaeologists fell silent. The map was impossibly detailed, coastlines traced with such care that the curves felt alive, oceans shaded with strokes so steady they seemed drawn in one breath, islands scattered like careful punctuation, but nothing matched. Not the bays, not the peninsulas, not the river mouths or deltas. It was as though the map showed a world adjacent to ours, familiar in shape, yet entirely wrong, like the memory of a dream fading the moment one tries to recall it. Some features resembled sections of ancient Earth before sea levels rose, before ice receded, before continents shifted in slow, grinding arcs. A few mountains aligned faintly with known ranges, their outlines softened by time. But the map's greatest puzzle lay along its northern edge, a vast landmass where no modern shoreline exists, drawn with such confidence that the cartographer seemed to know every inlet, every cliff, every sleeping bay. A mainstream historian suggested it might be an imagined world, a ceremonial geography, not a literal one. But another researcher pointed out that the map's accuracy in representing real marine currents was uncanny. Currents that modern oceanographers only charted in the 20th century were shaped on this ancient sheet with quiet precision. Even now, scholars still debate whether such knowledge was possible in the era the parchment was dated to. As we drift deeper into the mystery, The lantern's glow reveals something stranger still. Along the borders of the map run markings, not letters, not numbers, but shapes reminiscent of constellations, clusters of circles, lines pointing inland from the sea. Some symbols resemble familiar star patterns, but altered, as though drawn from a different latitude or a different epoch. One cluster matches the sky as it appeared around 10,000 BCE, another even older. This is the detail that unsettled the cartographers who studied it. The map seemed to hold not only forgotten shores, but forgotten skies. Buried in one corner was a small, delicate compass, rose carved directly into the parchment with a fine blade. Its needle pointed not north, but to a place labelled only with a symbol, an open circle surrounded by 8 short rays. Some believe it represented a sacred site. Others think it marked a place now underwater. A fringe theorist once suggested it pointed toward a civilization lost to rising seas, swallowed long before the first cities were ever built. As we noted earlier, while examining the machinery buried beneath the stars, some discoveries feel like remnants of knowledge preserved in defiance of time itself. This map carries that same quiet defiance, a message carved in ink that should not have survived, describing a world that should not exist. When researchers held the parchment under low, angled light, faint underdrawings emerged, sketches erased or corrected by the original maker. One sketch showed a shoreline extending further than the final version, suggesting the cartographer had witnessed or understood land disappearance. Another sketch marked an inland region with a symbol resembling a rising wave. Flood myth, ancient warning, or memory of a time when the world itself shifted? Scholars still debate. The vessel containing the map held another curiosity. A single bead of greenish glass, unnaturally smooth, with tiny air bubbles trapped inside like stars suspended in still water. Chemical analysis suggested it had been heated at temperatures difficult for early societies to achieve. Some think it was simply an ornament. Others believe it may have been part of an instrument used to project or study distant horizons. But the strangest part, the part that keeps researchers awake long after the lamps go out, lies not on the parchment, but on the reverse side. There, drawn in delicate, hesitant lines, is a coastline repeated twice, one labelled with a symbol resembling a rising sun, the other with a setting one. 2 versions of the same land, 2 ages, 2 truths. As if the cartographer had seen the world change, and wanted to remember both faces of the shore before one of them slipped beneath the tide of time forever. Stairway into nothing. The mountains around the plateau rise like the ribs of a sleeping giant, tall, jagged, and motionless beneath the pale glow of a quiet moon. Up here, where the air thins and every sound feels swallowed before it leaves your lips, explorers once found a structure so strange, so hauntingly deliberate, that even the wind seems unsure whether to move around it or through it. It is a staircase, wide at the base, narrowing as it rises, carved into the living stone of the cliff face with a precision that should have been impossible for the age to which it was first attributed, and yet its purpose ends abruptly mid-air, against an open sky, with no platform, no ledge, no shelter waiting above. The stairway was officially documented in 1939 during a geological survey across the high ridges. A team had been mapping fault lines when they stumbled across the structure, half concealed by centuries of dust and wind-shaped debris. When they cleared the surface, the steps emerged one by one, each deeply carved, each perfectly angled, climbing toward an empty point as if waiting for something that never arrived, or something that once was there and is now gone. The first question was simple. Why would anyone build a staircase that leads to nothing? A mainstream archaeologist suggested it may have once connected to a wooden platform now long decayed, but the stone around the uppermost steps bore no peg holes, no anchors, no scars, nothing to suggest anything had ever been attached. Others proposed that erosion had claimed the rest of the structure, yet the cliff face showed no signs of collapse, no remnants of fallen stone, no fractures indicative of a missing extension. It was as though the staircase had always ended in emptiness. As we move closer, lantern light drifts across the steps, revealing thin lines etched along the risers, tiny grooves too uniform to be random. Some resemble tally marks, others look like directional symbols. One step bears a swirl pattern reminiscent of those found earlier in the ashes of a hidden age, an echo, a quiet thread stitching these mysteries together, across distances and centuries. Scholars still debate whether these markings were decorative or functional. An encoded message guiding ritual participants upward, step by deliberate step, toward a destination that existed not in the physical world but in the realm of belief. The most curious feature sits at the base. Embedded in the first step is a small disc of polished black stone, about the size of a coin. It reflects almost nothing, absorbing the lantern glow rather than shining beneath it. When touched, it feels cooler than the surrounding rock, as though kept in shadow even under direct light. A fringe researcher once proposed that the disc marked the beginning of a procession route, a ceremonial ascent toward enlightenment, or sacrifice, or communion with whatever the ancients believed awaited at the top. But the deeper mystery came from an unexpected observation. In the early 1970 seconds, a physicist visiting the site noticed that sound behaved oddly near the upper steps. Whispers carried farther. Footsteps echoed with a hollow resonance despite the open air. Some even claimed that standing at the very top created a sensation of pressure around the ears, as though a chamber existed where there was nothing but sky. Acoustic mapping later revealed that the cliff face acts as a natural amplifier, directing sound upward along the staircase like water running through a narrow channel. Whether the builders knew this, whether they shaped the steps to harness this effect remains unknown, yet the intentionality feels undeniable. As we noted earlier, among the ruins of the carved library, some ancient architects worked not only with stone, but with silence and with sound. The staircase becomes more unsettling when viewed at dusk. When the sun dips low, the steps cast long, symmetrical shadows that extend perfectly outward, forming patterns that look uncannily like spokes on a wheel. From above, captured in old aerial photographs, the entire formation resembles a compass, pointing not north, but toward a barren expanse of desert, far beyond the mountains. A destination long forgotten, or perhaps one the builders wished never to be found again. At night, when the moon rises directly above the stairway's highest point, the steps seem to glow faintly, as though the stone remembers some ancient alignment with the heavens. And in that pale light, the emptiness at the top no longer feels accidental, it feels deliberate, like a threshold suspended in the air, waiting for someone who knows how to cross it. Near the uppermost step, archaeologists once found a single object wedged in a crevice, a small, smooth bead of white quartz, perfectly round, perfectly cold. Its surface bore no markings, yet holding it created a strange sensation, as though the bead vibrated faintly, responding to the pulse of the one who touched it. What was this staircase for? A monument? A ritual ascent? A meeting point between earth and sky? Scholars still debate, but the silence around it deepens with each passing year, and as the wind brushes past the final step and vanishes into the open air, there is a moment, just a breath, where it feels as though the stairway once led somewhere real, somewhere just out of reach, somewhere waiting. Cave of painted skies. The entrance to the cave lies hidden behind a curtain of vines, their leaves trembling softly, as if aware of the secret they conceal. From the outside, it appears ordinary, just another dark opening in a hillside shaped by centuries of quiet erosion. But the moment one steps inside, the world changes. The temperature drops, the air settles, and a hush falls so complete that even your own breath feels borrowed. It was in 1968, during a botanical survey, that two researchers seeking shelter from sudden rain wandered into this cavern. Their lanterns cast thin golden arcs across the walls and revealed colors no cave should hold. Pinks, blues, violets, deep reds, bright ochres, pigments so vivid they seemed untouched by time, unspoiled by moisture, unsusceptible to decay. The walls were covered in them, painted skies stretching from floor to ceiling in sweeping arcs, like fragments of a forgotten cosmos preserved in stone. At first, the artwork was assumed to be ceremonial, a depiction of stars, perhaps, or myths of creation. But as archaeologists arrived and studied the patterns closely, something far stranger emerged. The skies painted here didn't match any known constellations, not ancient Egyptian, not Mesopotamian, not even the star maps of early nomadic cultures who roamed these lands. The depictions were precise, yet unfamiliar clusters and spirals of stars arranged in formations that belonged nowhere in our night sky. A mainstream astronomer tried to match the cave's stars to early heavens as they would have appeared thousands of years ago. Some clusters aligned faintly toward the sky of 14,000 BCE, but only faintly. Others belonged to no recorded epoch at all. Scholars still debate whether the paintings represent the real sky, or visions, or something the artists believed existed beyond human sight. The pigments themselves posed another question. Chemical analysis revealed a mix of minerals rarely found together, some requiring high temperatures to refine, others originating from regions extremely far from the cave's location. One pigment contained traces of a rare crystalline compound typically formed under volcanic conditions. Another bore a metallic sheen similar to powder, found near meteoric impact sites. How did ancient artists gather such unusual materials? How did they refine them? How did the colors remain so impossibly vivid after thousands of years? As we drift deeper into the cavern, lantern light falls across a series of circular paintings, vast spirals resembling galaxies. The spirals narrow toward their centers, each terminating in a bright point rendered with meticulous care. Some explorers described a strange sensation when gazing at them, a feeling of movement, as though the spirals pulled gently at the edges of perception, drawing the viewer inward, and deeper still, the cave reveals its most haunting chamber. Here, the ceiling arches high above the explorers' heads, and the entire surface is painted with a continuous horizon, a seamless sky stretching in every direction. The effect is dizzying. Stand at the center of the chamber and look up, and it feels as though the ground has fallen away, that you are floating, suspended between earth and space. As we noted earlier in our journey through the sleeping hill and the city of erased footsteps, some ancient sites seem designed not just to be visited, but to be experienced in ways that alter one's sense of place. This chamber feels like that a doorway, not physical, but perceptual. Near the back wall, a row of handprints is arranged in a perfect arc. But these handprints are unusual. The fingers are long, slender, and slightly curved, as though belonging to individuals with subtly different proportions. Tests showed the pigment used for the prints contained organic residue, suggesting the artists pressed their hands directly into the wet paint. Fringe researchers once claimed these prints belonged to a different lineage. Mainstream experts dismiss the idea, but struggle to explain the anatomical differences, insisting they may reflect stylization or artistic exaggeration. Yet the prints feel too intimate, too personal, too specific to be anything but real. Toward the chamber's center lies a stone slab, polished smooth by countless touchings. A shallow groove runs across it, filled with pigment residue, as though the artists mixed their colors here under dim torchlight. But when UV light was tested on the surface decades later, faint traces appeared, lines invisible to the human eye, forming a constellation that matches none on Earth. Some believe it was a map, others think it a memory. Scholars still debate its meaning. And yet, standing in the heart of the cave, surrounded by skies that never belonged to our world, one cannot help but feel the faintest hum beneath the stone, a low, rhythmic vibration, like the echo of some ancient chant or the pulse of a world hidden behind the painted veil. No instruments have ever detected it, but countless visitors swear they felt it, and as the lantern dims, and the painted stars shimmer with colors that seem almost alive, the darkness begins to breathe again, as if the cave itself is slowly waking. The watcher in the earth, the forest around the ravine moves with a slow, deliberate calm, its branches swaying like tired guardians keeping watch over something they no longer remember. The air here feels heavier than the trees, justified thick with moss, with memory, with the quiet weight of things buried deep. And at the bottom of that ravine, half swallowed by centuries of soil and roots, lies the face that should never have been there. It was first noticed in 1977, when unusually heavy rains triggered a landslide. What emerged from the shifting earth was not rock, not soil, not any natural formation, but an eye, a stone eye large, perfectly shaped, staring upward through layers of mud, as though it had waited patiently for the world to uncover it again. Archaeologists rushed to the site, brushes trembling slightly as they cleared away the soil, and inch by inch the rest of the face emerged. It was enormous, nearly 4 meters from brow to chin, carved with such precision that the shadows within its features seemed to move as the light changed. The expression was neutral, almost serene, as though the figure had been carved to witness something, or to guard something no longer understood. The most baffling detail was its age. Sediment layers suggested the carving predated the surrounding forest by millennia, older than the nearest known settlements, older than the region's earliest tools. Scholars still debate whether the carving was made by a culture we haven't yet found, or by hands whose abilities we've deeply underestimated. As the team excavated further, more of the figure appeared: shoulders buried under roots, a torso pressed tightly into the earth, arms extending downward as if gripping something beneath the soil. The body wasn't complete, only the upper portion survived intact, but what remained was enough to unsettle even the most seasoned researchers. The style didn't match any regional artwork. The stone used was foreign to the area, likely transported from miles away. A mainstream geologist insisted the ancient carvers must have shaped the statue on site. But the puzzle remained. How did a prehistoric society move such massive stone into the ravine? No nearby quarry matched its composition. No broken fragments indicated local carving. And then there was the strange phenomenon reported by multiple workers. A faint vibration beneath the statue, barely noticeable at first. A subtle hum more felt than heard. In the early excavations, the claim was dismissed as imagination fatigue, the thrum of nearby machinery, the tremor of distant thunder. But years later, sensitive geological instruments recorded something unusual. The earth beneath the watcher resonated, not constantly, not loudly, but rhythmically pulsing every few minutes, like a heartbeat too slow to belong to anything alive. The readings were inconclusive. Some proposed shifting groundwater, others thought it might be distant seismic movements. Yet the rhythm was too regular, almost intentional. As we move slowly along the statue's surface, lantern light reveals more details carved into the stone. Thin grooves spiraling around the arms, faint symbols clustered near the collarbone. Some resemble star patterns, others echo motifs from the painted cave we visited earlier, as if these sites, separated by miles and epochs, shared a whisper of the same forgotten language. Near the base of the figure's neck, explorers found something even stranger, a narrow slit carved into the stone. It wasn't a crack, it wasn't damage, it was a deliberate opening, too precise to be accidental. Inside, a cavity extended downward too deep to explore fully, too dangerous to widen without risking collapse. A fringe theorist once suggested the statue was not a guardian, but a marker, a signpost built over something buried far below, something the ancient world hoped would remain hidden. Mainstream scholars rejected the idea, but none could explain the cavity's purpose. Why would a culture carve such a feature into the throat of a giant figure? As we noted earlier, in the tomb beneath the sleeping hill, some ancient structures feel like thresholds rather than monuments. This statue, this watcher, carries that same presence. At sunset, when the last light spills across the ravine, the face seems to shift subtly. The eyes, once dull and buried, catch the glow like polished stone. The shadows beneath the brows deepen until the figure appears almost awake. And in that fleeting moment, standing at the edge of the ravine, you might feel something impossible to name. Not fear, not dread, but a quiet awareness, as though the earth beneath the watcher is not asleep at all, but waiting for the next layer of soil to fall away. Temple beyond courage, high in the cliffs where the wind sharpens into a thin, whistling thread, a narrow path winds upward, so steep and so unforgiving that even seasoned climbers pause before attempting it. Up here, the world feels thinner, quieter, stripped of comfort and certainty. And at the very end of this perilous ascent stands the structure the locals once called the place where breath fails. A temple so isolated, so unnervingly silent, that the earth around it seems to recoil from approaching footsteps. The first formal record of the temple came in 1894, when an expedition charting mountain passes stumbled upon the stone pillars jutting from the cliff like the ribs of an ancient beast. From the distance of morning haze, the structure appeared half-formed, as though emerging from the rock itself. But as the explorers drew closer, their lanterns revealed deliberate architectural precision. Pillars aligned in perfect symmetry, doorways carved with careful restraint, surfaces polished until they reflected the pale mountain light. Yet there was no path beyond the narrow ridge, no settlements, No signs of habitation, nothing to suggest why or how any culture would build a sacred monument in a place that demanded so much courage simply to reach. Inside, the temple held an even deeper strangeness. The main chamber was vast, carved not from stone blocks, but directly from the mountain itself. A dome-shaped ceiling arched overhead, cut so smooth it felt almost impossible for tools of that age. At the center stood a single pedestal, circular, flawless, slightly concave, as if meant to cradle something delicate. But that central object, whatever it had once held, was long gone. The walls bore patterns in faint relief, rows of repeating shapes that resembled eyes watching from every angle. Some sets were narrow, others round, some arranged in spirals. The motifs echoed artwork from other ancient cultures, yet didn't match any precisely. Scholars still debate whether these were symbolic guardians, or records of watchers, meant to observe and warn. The acoustics of the chamber added another layer to its unsettling presence. Even a whisper carried with unnatural clarity, drifting from wall to wall like a soft echo chasing itself. A mainstream historian once described it as a room tuned to hear. Every sound felt amplified, suspended in the air, as though the temple itself listened to those brave or foolish enough to enter. As we drift further into the gloom, lantern light catches something on the floor. A thin line carved into the rock, tracing a path from the entrance to the pedestal. The line isn't straight, it bends in gentle arcs, creating loops that interlock like celestial orbits. Some researchers believe this path represented a ritual journey. Others think it mapped a star cycle, and yet its purpose remains lost. In the outer chamber, explorers found a niche containing a small metallic object no larger than a thumb, crafted from an alloy with traces of copper, silver, and an unidentified mineral. When handled, the object emitted a faint warmth unlike anything natural at that altitude. Some fringe theorists jumped to dramatic conclusions, calling it a key or a focusing crystal, but mainstream experts simply placed it in storage, labeling it an anomalous artifact. As we noted earlier in the Cave of Painted Skies, some sites appear intentionally unreachable gateways to knowledge or experience meant only for a select few. This temple carries that same quiet exclusivity, as though its builders believed sacred truths must be hidden behind trials of courage. Yet something deeper unsettled the excavation teams. Beneath the pedestal's concave surface, a subtle vibration was detected just once around twilight. Not a tremor from the earth, not wind, but a soft, rhythmic thrum, almost like the heartbeat we sensed beneath the watcher in the earth. It faded within seconds, never repeating. Still, the moment was enough to raise a chilling question among the researchers. Was the pedestal reacting to something, or expecting something that had not yet arrived? Outside, the narrow ridge leading to the temple grows colder after sunset. Shadows pile up against the cliff walls, and the structure seems to shrink into its own darkness. Yet if you stand quietly near the threshold, the wind slips past with an odd, low resonance, as though carrying a sound too old, too fragile, too hesitant to be fully heard. And at that moment, you may feel what countless visitors have described. Not fear, not awe, but the sense that somewhere deep in the mountain stone, something waits with immense patience for the one brave enough to place something back upon the empty pedestal. Flame that would not fade. At the edge of an old valley, where the ground dips into a cradle of whispering reeds, there stands a ruin so small and so unassuming that most travelers pass it without a glance. Just a ring of stones, a toppled arch, a scatter of weathered bricks half swallowed by earth. Nothing that suggests importance, nothing that hints at the impossible glow once seen within its broken heart. Yet the first record of the flame came from a shepherd in 1889, a quiet man who claimed that, on certain nights, a faint orange shimmer rose from the ruin like a slow, pulsing breath. He wasn't believed, not until others saw it too. Not until archaeologists arrived and found something still warm in the ashes of a fire that should have died thousands of years ago. The hearth lay at the center of the structure, a shallow bowl carved directly into bedrock. Its stone was unnaturally smooth, polished by heat far hotter than any wood-burning flame could produce. And beneath the top layer of soot, researchers discovered an ember small, cold to the touch. But when held in shadow, it glowed, faintly, persistently, as though remembering the fire it had once been part of. a mainstream chemist proposed. The ember contained minerals capable of storing and releasing light, similar to ancient luminous paints. But the composition didn't match any known material. Fragments nearby revealed traces of rare earth elements found only in deep magma deposits. Somehow, the ancients had acquired them, refined them, used them. Scholars still debate whether the ember's glow is natural luminescence or something more deliberate, crafted by hands that understood fire far differently than we do. As we drift deeper into the ruin, lantern light falls across the inner walls, each one marked with long, looping strokes of blackened pigment. The lines resemble smoke trails frozen in time, sweeping upward like the rising breath of a ceremonial flame. Some loops are tight spirals, others stretch in tall, graceful arcs. Together they form a mural that feels alive, as though the fire that once burned here tried to speak through shapes instead of words. A small alcove behind the hearth held another curiosity, a metal bowl with charred residue at its base. Tests revealed it had once burned an oily substance unlike any plant-based fuel known in the region. The scent, faint even now, hinted at resin and mineral dust, an unlikely mixture. A fringe theorist once suggested it was a forever oil created to sustain a flame for ritual or signal. But no surviving text supports such an idea, just the evidence of something that burned too hot and too long and too strangely to be ordinary. As we noted earlier in the Temple Beyond Courage, some ancient sites appear engineered to interact with light and heat built around sensations rather than objects. Here, too, that deeper intention lingers like a warm breath against cold stone. The ruin's greatest mystery lies in a narrow passage to the east, where soot marks darken the walls up to the ceiling. These marks form a pattern, horizontal bands, each the width of a human hand. When measured, the spacing matches solar intervals, as though the flame within the hearth once cast shadows that served as a crude yet strangely elegant calendar. Scholars still debate the meaning of these bands. Were they records of time, markers of ritual days, or something more cautionary, a countdown, perhaps, marking the diminishing strength of a flame that was never meant to die? At sunset, the ruin undergoes a subtle transformation. Shadows lengthen across the floor, merging with those soot-borne bands until the whole chamber seems to darken in perfect symmetry. And it is then, when the light thins just enough, that the ember in the hearth glows brightest, its tiny pulse rising like a heartbeat stirring after a long sleep. No fire feeds it, no heat warms it, yet the glow persists, soft, steady, endlessly patient. Local lore claims the flame once served as a beacon, guiding travelers across vast distances, its light visible for miles. Others believe it marked a sacred gathering place, a point where ancient astronomers signaled their observations to neighboring tribes. But one final discovery complicates these theories. Beneath the hearth, a concealed cavity was found containing a thin sheet of hammered metal etched with symbols that do not match any known writing system. The lines resemble flickering tongues of fire, curling into spirals that echo the mural on the walls. Hidden near the bottom of the sheet is a single repeated mark, a circle drawn around a small, flame-like wedge. The mark appears 13 times. Its meaning remains a topic of endless debate, but when night falls, and the last traces of daylight slip beyond the horizon, the ruin grows very still. The air cools, the reeds rustle softly, and in the center of the silent chamber, that ancient ember glows once more faint, unwavering, as though waiting for the flame that once lived here to return. Ship stranded in stone, the cliffside rises like a frozen wave, its jagged ridges catching the moonlight in thin, silver lines. For centuries, travelers passed beneath it without noticing anything unusual, just another wall of ancient rock, worn smooth by wind and patient time. But after a minor earthquake in 1956 split part of the cliff open, something impossible revealed itself from the stone's long-held silence. A ship, not a carving, not an engraving, a ship embedded halfway into the rock face, as though caught in stone mid-voyage. The vessel's wooden frame, if it could even be called wood anymore, had undergone a transformation so unusual that geologists struggled to classify it. Portions were fossilized, hardened to the consistency of mineral. Other sections retained faint wooden fibers, preserved as though protected from decay by forces no one understood. The ship's hull curved outward from the cliff, its bow protruding just enough to catch the moonlight like a relic paused between moments. Its discovery sparked immediate disbelief. The site lies nearly 400 kilometers inland from the nearest ancient shoreline. No known sea, flood, or inland waterway ever touched these mountains, not in recorded history, not in any reconstructed prehistoric map. And yet, the ship sat there, half swallowed by the stone, resting at an angle as if the rock had risen around it or the vessel had sunk slowly into the mountain. Scholars still debate these possibilities, though neither feels entirely satisfying. The earliest close examination revealed something even stranger. Along the hull, faint carvings appeared, odd linear symbols arranged in vertical columns. Some resembled tall waves, others looked like constellations, and below one set of markings, a stylized image of a bird in flight seemed to echo the obsidian figurine found earlier among the ashes of a hidden age. Connections? Coincidence? No one could say. Inside the vessel, accessed through a natural fracture in the cliff, archaeologists found a chamber containing stone jars sealed with resin. The jars held fragments of dried plant matter, heavily compressed over time. Botanical analysis revealed the species no longer exists in the region, nor anywhere nearby. One sample matched an extinct coastal shrub, found only in ancient sediment layers near long-vanished shorelines. As we drift through the vessel's shadowed interior, lantern light reveals another oddity. The planks on the inner walls were shaped using a method of bending wood only mastered much later in known maritime history. A mainstream expert proposed the ship may have been constructed by a culture whose technological sophistication has been underestimated. But others noted the joinery patterns bore similarities to seafaring methods, found thousands of miles away, an unsettling parallel for a vessel built so far inland. And deeper inside, the most disturbing discovery awaited. A set of 3 wooden ribs perfectly preserved beneath layers of mineral accretion bore scorch marks, not from an external flame, but from within the vessel. The burn patterns radiated outward in symmetrical arcs, as though a controlled, ritualistic fire once burned at the ship's center. This mirrored the strange flame that refused to fade in the ruin miles away, hinting at a shared cultural thread weaving quietly through these impossible finds. Scholars still debate the meaning of that fire. Was it ceremonial? A signal? A funerary rite for someone or something carried aboard? The answers remain buried in uncertainty. Near the stern, lodged between petrified beams, a bronze ring was recovered, thin, intricately twisted, almost like braided rope cast into metal. Its inner surface had small engraved dots that formed a spiral, drifting inward in a pattern found earlier among the carved stones of the ancient library. Once again, sites separated by incredible distance seem to whisper the same forgotten symbols, but perhaps the most haunting element is the ship's orientation. Its bow faces upward, toward the sky, as if, in its final moment, it aimed not for water, but for ascent. Standing in the moonlit quiet, with the hull rising from stone like a vessel trapped between worlds, one cannot shake the feeling that the mountain did not swallow the ship. It embraced it, preserved it, held it like a secret the earth was reluctant to surrender. And tonight, under the cold glow of the stars it once may have followed, the vessel feels almost awake, as if listening, patiently, for someone to finish the journey it began. Faces around the silence. The plateau, where the wind never seems to rest, holds a loneliness that feels older than memory itself. Wide, empty, and sun-bleached, it hides its true nature beneath layers of silence so deep that even distant echoes refuse to return. Yet at its center, where the ground dips into a perfect circle, stand the faces, dozens of them, carved from pale stone, each one half buried in the earth, arranged in a ring so wide it can only be seen clearly from above. And at their center lies nothing, not an altar, not a marker, just a hollow space the size of a small room, a place so quiet it seems to absorb every sound that dares to enter. The faces were discovered in 1932 by surveyors mapping a trade route. From afar, they appeared to be scattered stones washed into a natural depression. But as the team approached, the eyes emerged first deep-set, elongated, staring upward as though awaiting a signal from the sky. One by one, the expressions came into view, solemn, serene, some appearing almost mournful. The symmetry of the circle was precise, each face equidistant from the next, each tilted at a near identical angle. The carvings were weathered but unmistakably intentional, shaped by hands that understood anatomy far better than early cultures are credited with. Yet no nearby settlement exists, no ruins, no quarries, nothing to indicate who made these faces, or why they were placed here, gazing inward at the silent center. A mainstream anthropologist suggested the faces might have been guardians, protectors, watching over a ceremonial space. But this theory wavered when researchers noticed something subtle. The lips on every face were parted, as though in the first breath of a word never spoken. Scholars still debate whether this detail was artistic style, or something more unsettling, a depiction of many individuals caught mid-whisper. The silence of the hollow amplifies this eerie impression. Step into the center, and the world changes. The wind disappears. Your breath feels muted, as though smothered. A dropped pebble makes no sound. Even your footsteps fade before reaching your ears. Acoustic studies later revealed the depression forms a rare, naturally perfect sound-absorbing basin. But the alignment of the faces angled precisely to direct unseen sound toward the hollow suggests the builders understood this effect. Some believe the place was meant to swallow sound. Others claim it was meant to contain it. As we drift slowly between the faces, lantern light reveals finer details. Faint etchings curl around the cheeks, spiral motifs similar to those found in the painted cave, hinting at cultural threads tying disparate mysteries together. One face bears a crescent carved above the left eye, an identical symbol found earlier on the disc, resting in the stone library's hidden chamber. Coincidence? Pattern? Or the quiet signature of a forgotten people? Near the western arc, a peculiar discovery added a deeper layer to the mystery. Beneath one face, buried just beneath the soil, archaeologists unearthed a small stone cube with openings on each side, an ancient wind instrument, perhaps. When blown into, however, no sound emerged. Only a vibration felt in the fingertips, like a hum trapped inside the stone. A fringe researcher once claimed the cube was meant for the silent hollow, that only when placed in the exact center would it speak. Such theories were dismissed, but no one dared test the idea after a team member reported feeling faint while standing in the hollow for too long. He described the sensation as the silence pressing against the inside of my skull. As we noted earlier with the stairway into nothing, some ancient structures feel less like monuments and more like thresholds designed to interact with perception, with sound, with presence itself. Here, that threshold is felt in the very bones. At dusk, the plateau turns gold, and the faces seem to glow softly, their features growing sharper as shadows lengthen. From a distance, the ring appears to shift just slightly, as though the expressions lean forward, listening to the encroaching night. Some visitors swear the silence in the hollow deepens after sunset, becoming so heavy it feels like standing underwater. Others report a faint sensation, a low vibration in the chest, like the echo of a word someone tried to speak but swallowed at the last moment. No instruments have recorded this. No studies confirm it. Yet those who have felt it describe it the same way, as if something beneath the hollow is waiting for the right sound, and the right moment to wake. Tonight, under the rising moon, the faces around the circle seem almost alive, gazing inward toward a silence so profound it feels fragile, breakable, poised on the edge of revelation, and somewhere beneath that quiet surface, the earth seems to hold its breath. Hearts locked in pyramids. The desert around the pyramids stretches outward in a quiet, endless murmur, sand shifting like an ancient breath, dunes drifting as though remembering shapes carved by forgotten winds. Most travelers see only the structures rising against the horizon, their silhouettes sharp and unwavering. But deep beneath one of these lesser-known pyramids, hidden away from tourist routes and textbooks, lies a chamber whose existence was never meant to be discovered. It was during a routine restoration in 1974 that workers noticed a hollow echo beneath one cornerstone, a sound too deep, too resonant, to be an ordinary flaw. When the slab was carefully lifted, a narrow shaft revealed itself, cutting down into darkness so absolute it felt like staring into the memory of the earth itself. The descent had to be done slowly. Ropes, lanterns, patience, and at the bottom, 30 meters below the desert floor, the explorers found a chamber sealed by a door of solid limestone perfectly fitted, untouched by shifting sand or time. Behind it lay a room unlike any other found in pyramid architecture, The chamber was circular, perfectly carved. The walls were smooth, with no chisel marks, as though shaped not by tools but by intention. And at the center stood a pedestal engraved with looping lines that twisted inward like the spiral of a shell. Upon that pedestal rested a stone vessel, small, rounded, lidded, its surface polished so finely it reflected lantern light like water. A faint reddish tint pulsed within the stone, shifting subtly as though lit from the inside by the slow heartbeat of something ancient. A mainstream archaeologist suggested it was a ceremonial urn, nothing more. But the moment the vessel was touched, the chamber changed. The air thickened. Lantern flames wavered, dimming as if struggling against a sudden pull. One explorer reported hearing a rhythmic pulse, deep and distant, like the echo of a drumbeat, submerged beneath layers of stone. Scholars still debate whether this was a psychological response to the chamber's acoustics, or something more. When the lid was lifted, the vessel revealed its second secret. Inside lay a heart-shaped object, crafted from a dark mineral that glimmered faintly with flecks of metallic silver. Not a human heart, not an animal's, but a carved symbol, an emblem resting in a bed of fine dust. Tests would later show the mineral was not native to the region. In fact, its composition matched deposits found in a distant mountain range associated with meteor remnants. This heart was not meant to represent life. It was meant to bind something, to lock it away, and the markings on the pedestal hinted at its purpose. Circles nested within circles, lines branching like veins, curves that echoed the horizon paths of certain stars, particularly those tied to ancient Egyptian rituals surrounding the soul and its celestial journey. As we noted earlier in the silent faces circling the hollow, some cultures seemed to weave the sky into their rituals with precision far deeper than chance. Here, too, that connection pulses quietly. One scholar proposed that the chamber was meant to anchor something, an essence, a fragment of belief, or the symbolic heart of a forgotten deity or ruler. This idea was dismissed by many, yet no conventional explanation fits the craftsmanship or the chamber's extreme isolation. There were more clues. Around the circular walls, faint etchings appeared only visible when lantern light shifted at certain angles. They resembled people, human figures kneeling, hands raised toward the pedestal, each drawn with elongated limbs and stylized faces. Their posture was not worship, but desperation. A fringe researcher once claimed the chamber was a place of containment rather than reverence, a vault built to imprison not an object, but an idea, a memory too powerful or too dangerous to live freely in the world above. Beneath the pedestal, hidden under a removable stone plate, archaeologists found another cavity. Inside lay a thin tablet of black obsidian, etched with a single symbol, a heart surrounded by 3 concentric rings. The symbol matched one found in a different pyramid complex hundreds of miles away, and matched a faint pattern observed in the painted cave's deepest chamber. These echoes between sites small, scattered, persistent hint at a thread the ancient world once understood, weaving through places now isolated by time. Yet the strongest mystery lies in the room's acoustics. When someone stands directly before the pedestal and speaks, their voice does not echo. It folds back inward softly, gently, until the words feel as if spoken by someone standing beside them. The effect is subtle, unsettling, like the chamber itself is repeating the sound, not with its own voice, but with yours. No other burial room or ritual chamber in the region exhibits this effect. Tonight, as moonlight brushes the desert above, the sealed chamber rests in its darkness, the heart-shaped stone quiet but never truly lifeless. It sits with the patience of something that understands time differently, as though waiting, listening, guarding whatever truth it was carved to protect. And if one presses an ear to the pedestal, some say they hear it still. A faint, slow pulse, a heartbeat locked away beneath sand and silence, language that refused to speak. The valley where the tablets were found is a quiet place, too quiet, the kind where the wind moves carefully, brushing across the old stones as though afraid of waking something beneath them. Low hills rise on either side like gentle shoulders, and at their center lies a dry riverbed, cracked and pale, shaped by a stream that vanished centuries ago. It was here, in 1938, that a set of stone tablets emerged from the dust after a rare seasonal flood stripped away the topsoil, like peeling back a forgotten page. At first glance, the tablets seemed ordinary, flat, rectangular, carved with the steady hand of a practiced artisan. But the moment the sun struck their surface, the markings revealed themselves dense rows of symbols that flowed across the stone with unnerving precision. Not random lines, not decorative flourishes, but a script no one has ever been able to read. The characters were unlike any known writing system. Some curved like hooks, some branched like rivers, others resembled stars, connected by delicate, thread-like lines. Even their spacing suggested grammar pauses, emphasis, the rise and fall of sentences shaped in a language the world no longer remembers. Scholars still debate whether it is a true language or something more abstract, an early attempt at encoding knowledge through symbols that reflected something beyond spoken words. But the first clue that this script was unusual came from the stone itself. The tablets were carved from a type of basalt foreign to the valley. No quarries nearby contained it. The nearest source lay hundreds of miles away, across terrain that would have been nearly impossible to traverse for early cultures. Yet the tablets were shaped with clean edges, their surfaces polished so smooth they reflected light like water. As we drift deeper into the mystery, something strange becomes evident. The marks do not seem carved. They seem grown. When examined under magnification, the grooves show no chisel marks, no tool scoring, no dust trapped in the cuts. Instead, the stone's grain appears warped, bent, reshaped from within, as though the symbols emerged from the material itself, coaxed into form rather than forced. A mainstream geologist suggested the markings may have been carved with obsidian tools polished beyond typical craftsmanship, but even he admitted the consistency was unnerving. Every line identical in depth, every curve perfectly smooth. One fringe theorist proposed the tablets were written using heat patterns burned into the stone, using a technique long forgotten. Others scoffed. Yet analysis revealed faint traces of thermal alteration around the grooves, as though the rock had once been heated to softness, without cracking. Near the riverbed, buried deeper in the sediment, archaeologists recovered something even more perplexing, a circular stone disc marked with the same symbols, but arranged in spirals rather than rows. At its center lay a raised dot, surrounded by radiating lines, almost like the pupil of an eye. When held at arm's length under the sun, the disc's symbols seemed to ripple, the grooves catching the light in waves that move subtly across the stone. Several researchers reported feeling disoriented, as though the patterns were shifting even when the disc remained perfectly still. It was during one such examination that a linguist noticed something. The symbols on the disc were not identical to those on the tablets. They were responsive. Turn the disc slightly, and different symbols seemed to align with one another. Seen from one angle, a pattern appeared like a constellation. Seen from another, it resembled the imprint of a hand. The language changed depending on how it was viewed. As we noted earlier in the chamber of carved stone, some ancient forms of communication seem to operate outside our familiar definitions. Knowledge shaped in patterns, memory encoded in form rather than spoken tongue. The tablets suggest the same lineage, a script that refused to speak through sound, choosing instead to communicate through motion, through light, through perspective. Even now, no scholar can read the language. Machine learning attempts have failed. Cognitive analyses find no pattern consistent with human syntax. Some researchers believe the script recorded astronomical cycles. Others argue it was meant to be interpreted musically, notes written as curves and intersections rather than tones. But the most chilling discovery came from a final tablet found half buried in silt. Unlike the others, this one contained only a single symbol, a circle. Within it, a smaller circle, and within that, a line slanted, almost like a falling star. No translation exists, but many who study the tablets describe the same uneasy feeling, the sense that the symbol is not a word, but a warning. Tonight, as the dry riverbed lies silent beneath the rising moon, the tablets rest where they've been placed in climate-controlled stone vaults. Yet sometimes, late at night, researchers swear the grooves on their surfaces glint just a little brighter than they should, as though the language is waiting for the world to remember how to listen. Streets under the streetlights. In the heart of an old city where modern lamps cast their glow across bustling avenues and late-night footsteps echo between aging walls, there lies a second city hidden beneath the first. Not a sewer, not a forgotten basement, but streets, real streets, laid out with the same careful geometry as the ones above, yet older by thousands of years. The discovery was accidental. In 1985, during routine electrical work beneath a busy intersection, contractors broke through what they assumed was an old foundation. Instead, their floodlight fell upon a perfectly preserved cobblestone road, edges crisp, surfaces unworn, as if waiting not uncovered but unveiled. Authorities sealed the area for maintenance, but word spread quickly through academic circles. Archaeologists arrived expecting a minor ruin. What they found defied every assumption about the city's history. The underground streets ran parallel to the modern ones above, aligned in uncanny precision. Turns, intersections, even slight bends mirrored the contemporary city layout, yet the stonework below was impossibly old. Layers of sediment and construction above suggested the buried streets predated the earliest recorded settlement here by thousands of years. Scholars still debate how such alignment is possible. Did the modern city unknowingly grow over the blueprint of a forgotten civilization? Or did later builders follow an echo, recreating patterns without understanding why? As we descend the steps leading into this subterranean quiet, lantern light reveals the details that haunt researchers the most. The walls lining the ancient streets are smooth limestone blocks carved with intersecting lines like maps drawn in reverse, as though charting movement not across land, but through time. Some intersections feature raised platforms, similar to modern crosswalk designs, yet too large for normal foot traffic. Others lead into chambers resembling shops or dwellings, but with no furniture, no pottery, no tools, only space. Space shaped with precision, preserved in eerie stillness. The floor stones themselves show almost no wear, no grooves from carts, no scuffs from footsteps, no signs that life ever passed through here. It is a city built for use, that was never used, or perhaps used in a way we no longer recognize. One chamber near the central junction contained a puzzling artifact, a brass rod sealed into the wall, angled upward toward the chamber's ceiling. When a beam of light was shone onto it, the rod reflected the glow along a narrow groove carved into the floor, guiding the light like water in a channel. A mainstream researcher suggested it was part of an ancient lighting system, reflective pathways designed to carry torchlight throughout the tunnels. But others noted that each rod pointed not toward practical destinations, but toward symbols carved high above. Symbols similar to those in the silent library of carved stone. Symbols that seem to grow rather than be carved. As we drift through the tunnels, we notice something else, an unsettling rhythmic pattern carved into the mortar between stones. Small repeating depressions, almost like fingerprints pressed into clay before it hardened. Their spacing suggests a steady tempo, a kind of pulse that moves beneath the city like a heartbeat. Tests proved the marks were intentional, not accidental, but their meaning remains unknown. Scholars still debate whether the underground city was ceremonial, astronomical, or something far stranger, an early attempt at designing controlled acoustics or light pathways, perhaps, like the stoic silence of the face-ringed basin we encountered earlier. Then came the discovery that shook every assumption. In a chamber directly beneath a major modern intersection, a team found a sealed doorstone fused shut by mineral deposits. Behind it lay a second street, even older, dug deeper into the earth. This lower level contained carvings not seen anywhere else, depictions of people with elongated limbs walking hand in hand, their forms covered in spirals and cross-hatched lines. These figures appeared to be descending staircases that led even deeper. A fringe theorist suggested the underground streets were part of a ritual descent into memory, into history itself. Others dismissed the notion, yet none could explain why the modern streets above followed the same paths, as if tracing the forgotten ones like shadows. At night, when the city quiets and traffic hums fade into the distance, researchers working below swear they can hear something. Not machinery, not water, not echo, but footsteps, soft, measured, pacing along the ancient stone roads with patience beyond time. No microphones have captured these sounds. No instrument has validated them. Yet almost every long-term investigator describes the same experience. A presence moving just out of sight, walking the old streets beneath the glow of the modern ones, as though the buried city still remembers what it was built for. And as lantern light flickers across those silent tunnels tonight, the stones seem to tighten their hold on the darkness, waiting, watching, listening for the next traveller to step into a place where two cities overlap like memories layered in stone. Kingdom woven in leaves. Deep within a rainforest so dense that sunlight arrives only in thin, trembling threads, explorers once stumbled upon a city that was never meant to be built from stone. There were no walls, no pillars, no carved gates or monumental arches. Instead, the structures seemed to rise from the forest itself, woven from branches, roots, and living vines, shaped with such precision and quiet intelligence that early researchers believed they were looking at natural growth rather than architecture. The discovery took place in 1963, during an aerial survey charting migration patterns of endangered birds. From above, the canopy appeared strangely symmetrical, forming spirals and geometric clearings that defied the chaos typical of unregulated jungle life. When a small team descended into the greenery, machetes glinting faintly under the muted light, they found pathways narrow, winding, but unmistakably constructed, not paved, but grown, vines braided into rails, roots raised and coiled into steps, branches bent into archways without breaking, as though shaped by hands that understood the living forest intimately, pruning and guiding rather than cutting. Scholars still debate whether this was intentional horticulture or a natural phenomenon shaped by unknown ecological forces. Local tribes insisted the place was ancient, older than their own oldest stories, and that the forest remembered its builders. As we drift further inward, the forest soundscape shifts. Bird calls fade, insects quiet, and the air thickens with a strange sense of order, patterns in the leaves, rhythms in the rustle of branches, a harmony so subtle that the mind picks it up before the ears do. It was in the central clearing that the explorers found the first true structure, a circular hall formed by intertwining trees, their trunks spiraling together until they created a vaulted chamber open to the filtered sky. The floor was a mosaic of living moss, shaped into designs too intricate to be accidental, curves and spirals forming patterns reminiscent of the underground city's mysterious street carvings. At the center of the hall rose a pedestal made entirely of living roots, braided tightly into a shape that looked almost like a throne. On its surface rested a small object, a seed pod, smooth, oblong, carved with delicate lines that resembled writing but were too fluid to be stonework. Tests later showed the pod was petrified, millennia old, yet retained traces of organic tissue impossible to preserve naturally for such lengths of time. Here, too, the echoes of other discoveries whispered through the undergrowth. The lines on the seed mirrored patterns found on the stone tablets in the dry valley. The spirals resembled those painted in the cave of forgotten skies, connections stretching across continents, across ages, like threads of an invisible loom. And then came the deeper mystery. Near the hall, concealed beneath layers of fallen leaves, the team uncovered a system of tunnels hollowed not through stone, but through roots, passages twisted downward into darkness, their walls smooth, as though shaped by something tunneling with deliberate care. Within these tunnels, explorers found chambers containing woven sculptures, figures crafted from interlaced twigs, leaves, and bark. Some stood upright, some knelt. All faced east. A mainstream botanist proposed the figures were ceremonial effigies created by an ancient jungle tribe, but the age of the wood did not match human habitation. Some sculptures were so old the wood had fossilized. Others appeared fresh, as if renewed by the forest itself. Scholars still debate whether these effigies were created once, or continuously remade by the living forest, preserving a memory the humans who once lived here abandoned or forgot. The most unsettling discovery came when a botanist pressed his hand against one of the woven figures. It was warm, faintly warm, as if alive. The warmth faded within seconds, dismissed as residual heat or imagination. Yet the same phenomenon was reported again and again by different team members. As we noted earlier in The Watcher in the Earth, some ancient creations seem to hold a presence not of ghosts, but of something older, quieter, more intertwined with the land than any burial or monument. Among the roots and branches of this forgotten kingdom, that presence felt unmistakable. Above the central hall, the canopy formed a perfect spiral, leaves twisting in a pattern that mirrored the old seed pod's carvings. At sunset, when the last light filters through the trees, the spiral glows faintly, an illusion caused by shifting shadows, according to some, a sign of something deeper, according to others. And then there were the sounds. During their final night in the jungle, the explorers reported hearing soft rustling patterns, rhythmic, deliberate, moving through the canopy like breath. Not wind, not animals. Something else. Something that seemed to echo the ancient pulse beneath the pyramids and the hum within the carved stone library. The locals had warned them. The forest remembers the ones who taught it to grow. Tonight, as moonlight drifts through the tangled branches and the pathways glow in the pale shimmer of bioluminescent moss, the woven kingdom lies in its quiet majesty, alive, ancient, patient, a place not built, but grown, held together not by stone or faith, but by memory woven through leaves, bodies borrowed from time. The glacier hangs over the valley like a frozen tide, its blue depth swallowing sunlight and returning only a pale, ghostly glow. In the long winter months, when silence blankets the world in a slow, crystalline hush, it feels as though time itself has settled inside the ice, thick, unmoving, impenetrable. No one expected anything to emerge from that ancient cold, certainly not bodies. In the summer of 1991, when a brief heatwave cut channels through the glacial edge, climbers spotted something protruding from the melting ice, a shape too smooth, too deliberate, to be natural. At first, they assumed it was an animal trapped long ago, but as the thaw widened, the truth revealed itself in fragments. A hand, thin, elongated, skin darkened by millennia, fingers curled inward as though gently holding the last memory of warmth. The body that emerged was remarkably preserved, not mummified in the usual sense, but intact, as if the person had laid down only yesterday. Clothing still clung to the form-woven fibers, far more advanced than any prehistoric garments known in the region. Threads interlaced with patterns that mirrored the plant-weaving techniques of the forest kingdom we explored earlier. Patterns too similar to be dismissed as coincidence. Archaeologists arrived swiftly, their breath fogging in the cold air. As they carved away the remaining ice, a second body appeared beside the first, and then a third. 3 individuals, all different ages, all preserved with unnatural perfection. They were arranged deliberately, hands folded across their chests, heads tilted slightly toward one another, like figures positioned in quiet communion. But the strangest detail lay not in their posture, nor in their clothing, nor in the unprecedented preservation. It lay in their bones. Radiographic analysis revealed the skeletons had anomalies subtle but unmistakable. Extra-tendon anchors on the wrists, lengthened femurs, unusually flexible spinal curvature, traits not found in any known human population from the era. A mainstream anthropologist suggested these could be rare congenital variations, but 3 individuals sharing the same anomalies, preserved together, arranged with ceremonial precision. Scholars still debate the odds. The cold deepens as we drift near the excavation site, lantern flame bending in the frigid wind. Inside a temporary research tent, the bodies lie on insulated platforms. Their faces are serene, eyelids closed as if sleeping beneath the long ice. But their expressions differ, one peaceful, one strained, one almost smiling. The youngest of the 3 wore a necklace, tiny beads carved from a mineral identical to that found in the heart chamber beneath the pyramid. Each bead etched with spirals so small they could only be seen under magnification. The spirals matched symbols within the language that refused to speak. Connections spanning continents, spanning centuries, threads woven into time. Inside a pouch on the eldest figure's belt, researchers found an object that deepened the mystery, a disc made of volcanic glass, smooth and perfectly round, with shallow grooves spiraling inward. Under certain light, the grooves shimmered faintly, just like the celestial disc in the painted cave. Some theorists believe it served as a tool, others think it was ceremonial, yet the grooves showed wear, as if the disc had been turned many times before its burial in ice. As we noted earlier, among the ancient stairway and the carved stone library, some artifacts suggest a shared system of knowledge, one that drifted across landscapes, carried not by empire or trade, but by memory. These bodies may have belonged to the carriers. When researchers tested the clothing fibers, another anomaly emerged. The fibers were coated in a resin that resisted decay, an organic compound unknown in any natural plant of the region. It preserved the garments even as centuries passed. But more unsettling was the reaction the resin had to heat. When warmed gently, it glowed. Not brightly, not dangerously, just a soft, amber pulse, like the slow heartbeat found beneath the pyramids. Scholars still debate whether the resin was a preservative or part of a ritual involving light, warmth, and the movement of time. Near the excavation, a final find rests beneath a sheet of glass. A small wooden object shaped like a figurine, carved with elongated limbs identical to those of the preserved individuals. Its face bears no features, only a single spiral etched into the forehead, the same spiral found in distant sites, the same one painted in the cave of impossible constellations, the same shape carved into the stairway that climbed into nothing. At night, when the glacier sighs and cracks with the shifting cold, the bodies beneath their protective covers seem almost to breathe, faint movements caused by temperature changes, but unsettling nonetheless. Some researchers claim the air around the youngest figure warms slightly near sunset. No instruments confirm this, but the claim persists. And tonight, as the lantern flickers, casting long shadows across the melting chamber, the ice around the trio continues to recede. More details reveal themselves slowly, threads, etchings, artifacts trapped in the frost. The glacier borrowed these bodies from time, held them, preserved them. Now, it seems ready to return them. Steel from a fallen sky, in a barren plain where storms crawl slowly across the horizon and the earth lies cracked like old parchment, locals long spoke of a place where the ground rang like metal when struck. A strange tale dismissed for decades as folklore, until a survey team in 1931 followed those stories to a shallow depression half hidden beneath drifting dust. What they uncovered there felt less like an artifact, and more like an echo from the heavens. The object appeared at first to be a simple slab, dark and half buried, but when the sand was brushed away, an entire surface of polished alloy revealed itself smooth, seamless, unmarred by time. This metal did not rust. It didn't chip. It didn't behave like anything forged by ancient hands. And beneath that metal skin was something stranger still. The slab hummed. Not constantly, not loudly. Just a faint, low resonance that seemed to vibrate through the soil like a pulse. At night, the sound deepened, spreading outward until the plain itself felt like it was breathing. Scholars still debate the cause. Some blame shifting groundwater. Others propose thermal contraction, but none can explain why the pitch changes when the stars shift overhead, why the hum aligns with celestial movement as though listening to the sky. As the team excavated further, they realized the slab was only the exposed edge of a much larger shape, curved, hollow beneath the earth. A shell of metal, cold to the touch, yet strangely warm beneath its surface. It took weeks to uncover enough to understand the scale. This was no tool, no ornament, but a fragment of something vast, something that once fell from the sky. To determine composition, samples were taken with great effort, small shavings that resisted even modern diamond tools. Analysis revealed an alloy rich in nickel and cobalt, with traces of iridium markers typical of meteorites. And yet the structure was too even, too engineered, too deliberately shaped to be natural. A meteor shouldn't look worked, shouldn't feel crafted, shouldn't hum, but this one did. As we drift around the excavation trench, lantern light dances across its surface, revealing faint patterns almost like script etched into the metal, not carved, not pressed, but fused within the alloy itself, as though part of its formation. Some lines curve into spirals, others intersect like star maps. The patterns match the mysterious markings found on the heartstone beneath the pyramid and the symbols etched on the cave's celestial murals. The same motif, again, across impossible distances. A mainstream physicist argued these patterns may have formed through atmospheric entry fractures created by extreme heat. But heat fractures are chaotic, random. These lines are anything but. They form repeating sequences, geometric motifs, intent. Scholars still debate whether the metal shell was once part of a structure, something that traveled through the sky not as a rock, but as a vessel. A fringe theorist once proposed it was a sky arc, carrying knowledge or passengers across epochs. Most dismissed the idea, yet none could explain the interior cavity detected via ground sensors. Beneath the alloy lies a hollow, a perfect chamber sealed so tightly no instrument can penetrate it. Not even X-rays, not even ground-penetrating radar. And then there was the discovery that troubled the entire research team. At the base of the metal shell where the curve met fractured earth, archaeologists found scorch marks. Long, sweeping, arced burns across the soil. But the burns didn't originate from the metal. They curved toward it, as though something had once burned around the object, not from it. When tested under strong magnetic fields, the alloy responded with an unusual flicker, tiny pulses of energy moving across the surface in rhythm. That rhythm matched something else. The faint heartbeat-like thrum recorded beneath the watcher in the earth, the warm pulse of the resin coating the bodies borrowed from time, and the lingering glow in the flame that refused to fade. Subtle, distant, connected. As we noted earlier in the library of carved stone, some artifacts seem less like isolated creations and more like fragments of a larger, forgotten system, a network of symbols, materials, and intentions spread across continents. And here, under the cold night sky, the metal shell responds to starlight. When certain constellations cross overhead, the hum intensifies barely, but unmistakably like a tuning fork aligning with a distant note. One researcher, working late beneath the plane's moonlit hush, wrote a single line in her notebook. It isn't humming because it fell from the sky. It's humming because it remembers where it came from. Tonight, as the lantern's glow fades and the plane settles into the vast, breathless dark, the metal shell rests in its shallow bed of dust, silent to the ear, yet resonant with a patience that feels older than the earth itself. And just as the winds begin to rise, the hum stirs once more. So quiet it might be imagined, so steady it might be real. Roads drowned by the sea, where the coastline bends into a pale crescent and the waves roll in with slow, unhurried breaths. Divers once noticed something glinting beneath the blue-green surface, straight lines, unnatural angles, geometry hidden where only shifting sands should lie. The sea here is gentle, warm, deceptively calm, but beneath its quiet surface, a network of roads sleeps in the deep, as though waiting for the world above to remember them. The discovery happened in 1954, after a storm dragged sediment away from a shallow bay. Fishermen returning at dawn spotted odd patterns beneath the waterstone squares, arcs, and long corridors vanishing into deeper blue. When divers reached the site, they found something astonishing. A paved road, perfectly straight, stretching nearly half a kilometre before descending into darkness. A road built for footsteps, or wheels, or rituals long forgotten. A road that should not exist beneath the sea. The stones were fitted with such precision that even after centuries of submersion, the gaps remained impossibly tight. Marine growth clung to the edges like old lace, but the structure itself refused to collapse. The divers followed the road to its deepest visible point, where it intersected with another road, forming a broad crossroad now claimed by coral. Nearby, the faint outline of walls stood like ghosts in the water, their edges softened by waves. A sunken city? Not quite. More like a sanctuary, an engineered causeway built by hands that intended it to endure. Scholars still debate whether the roads belonged to an early coastal civilization swallowed by rising seas, or if they were built during a catastrophic flooding event lost to history. Sea levels have shifted dramatically over millennia, but nothing about the region's geology suggests a city should lie here, and yet the stones say otherwise. As we drift along the imagined walkway, lantern light refracted through a diver's lens casts shimmering patterns across the seabed. Closer inspection of the pavement reveals something startling. Tiny carvings along the stone's edges, symbols worn by time but not erased. Some resemble wave crests, others look like stars. Several match patterns carved in the stairway that climbed into nothing, and painted in the cave of forgotten skies, threads weaving once more. Near the junction where the two roads meet, divers found a peculiar structure. A raised platform with 4 pillars, each angled inward. At the top of the pillars, circular grooves held something once placed there, something heavy enough to leave indentations. The purpose remains unknown. A mainstream archaeologist proposed these were ceremonial markers used to honor tides or seasons. But the grooves showed scorch patterns, burn marks underwater. Impossible, unless the marks were made before the sea claimed the site. Further along the submerged causeway lies a rectangular stone basin, partially filled with sediment. Inside it, divers discovered fragments of white clay shaped into small tablets. On their surfaces were etched delicate lines too faint to decipher, too stylized to compare reliably with any known script. But their arrangement suggested intention. Those fragments were laid neatly in rows, protected by the basin as though preserved deliberately. Some experts believe they recorded astronomical cycles, or a calendar system. Others whisper that they were warnings, records of the rising waters that would soon swallow the world the builders knew. As we noted earlier in the map of forgotten shores, ancient cartographers sometimes depicted coastlines that no longer exist. Perhaps those marks were memories of a landscape erased by a great flood. Perhaps these drowned roads belonged to the same world. Near the deepest accessible section, marine archaeologists detected something unusual. A perfectly circular pit cut into the stone floor, its walls smoothed by hand. Inside the pit lay a metallic ring corroded, but unmistakably crafted. The ring's inner face bore faint spiral markings, nearly identical to those found in the heart chamber under the pyramid. Everywhere we go, the spiral returns. Scholars still debate whether these spirals represent water, stars, life, or movement through time. But here, beneath the sea, the symbol feels heavy with meaning, like a forgotten signature preserved across ages and landscapes. During a night dive in 1998, a marine biologist reported something even more unsettling. While hovering above the submerged road, she heard a deep, rhythmic pulse too steady to be waves, too regular to be equipment. It seemed to rise from the stones themselves, vibrating faintly through the water. Her recordings caught nothing, but she never recanted her account. Some sites hum, others glow. This one pulses. As the tide rises tonight and the moon casts shimmering paths across the water, the roads beneath the sea remain perfectly still, slumbering relics of a world lost not to time, but to tides that arrived too soon. And in the darkest stretch of the submerged walkway, just beyond where divers have dared to go, the stones disappear into a deeper blue, a place where the ocean hides the rest of the story. For now, doorway cut into dusk. At the western edge of a barren plateau where dusk lingers a little too long, where twilight seems reluctant to yield to night, there stands a doorway carved into a sheer rock wall. Not a building, not a ruin, just a doorway, a precise rectangular opening that leads into nothing but darkness, as though the stone itself decided to imitate the idea of passage without granting the courtesy of destination. It was first reported in 1912 by a group of surveyors marking boundary lines. They noted the impossibly smooth edges, the perfect right angles, the uncanny symmetry. No tool marks marred the stone, no weathering softened its frame. The doorway looked newly carved, recent, almost despite lying in a place untouched for centuries. But the true strangeness revealed itself when explorers stepped inside, or rather, tried to. The moment a person crosses the threshold, sound changes. Footsteps soften, breath dulls, voices flatten into strange, muffled tones. Some describe the interior as dead air, lacking the faint ambient hiss that fills most caves. Others say it feels like stepping into a heartbeat paused between beats, time thinning, space tightening around the body. Scholars still debate whether this acoustic anomaly is natural or engineered. Some argue it is a rare geological effect. Others note that no such effect has ever been found in a place shaped with such precision. The interior chamber is only a few steps deep, ending in a smooth back wall. No tunnels, no hidden passage, no altar or markings. Just blank stone that gives no explanation for its existence. Yet explorers swear the space feels larger than it looks. Stand in silence, and you may sense something shifting at the edge of perception, a subtle impression that the chamber extends further in some direction you cannot pinpoint. A few have claimed the darkness at the back wall flickers faintly, as though responding to the failing light outside. Among early expeditions, a pattern emerged. Those who entered at midday reported nothing unusual beyond the strange silence. But those who stepped through the doorway at dusk described a different experience entirely. Shadows inside the chamber seemed to gather, not deepen, gather, pooling around the doorway frame as if drawn toward it. Some compared the movement to ink dissolving in water, others to breath condensing in cold air. One fringe theorist suggested the doorway was built not to enter, but to observe, to capture a moment in the day when the world shifts between light and night, when perception wavers. The stone chamber, he argued, was a vessel for twilight. As we drift deeper into the mystery, lantern light reveals subtle depressions in the threshold, small indentations worn into the stone, arranged in patterns resembling footprints, but not human footprints, too narrow, too elongated. They resemble the handprints found in the painted sky cave, as though the same beings may have walked these thresholds long before the plateau turned barren. A mainstream archaeologist dismissed this similarity as coincidence, but her own notes admitted something she never officially published. The depressions aligned with astronomical markers, specifically the path of Venus at dusk. That discovery shook every assumption about the site. If the doorway was aligned intentionally with celestial movement, then it was not random, not decorative, not an unfinished structure. It was deliberate. As we noted earlier in the submerged roads and the ancient stairway, certain cultures seem to shape their monuments around the sky following cycles, mapping stars, weaving cosmic patterns into their architecture. This doorway follows that same thread. The plateau around it holds further clues. Scattered stones form faint radial lines leading toward the threshold. When traced, these lines converge on the doorway like sun rays pointing to a horizon. Under certain seasonal sunsets, the entire chamber glows with a thin, amber band of light, lasting only minutes before vanishing entirely. During one such sunset in 1979, a researcher took a photograph inside the chamber. When developed, the image revealed something the eye hadn't seen. The back wall was not smooth. It was etched, dusted with faint spiral carvings only visible under that specific light. Once again, the spirals, always returning. These spirals matched those found beneath the pyramid, on the celestial discs, on the drowned roadstones. A meaning echoed across lands and centuries. Scholars still debate what the spirals represent: cycles of time, celestial paths, connections between realms. But in this chamber, where dusk rotates through the doorway like a hinge between worlds, the symbol feels especially profound. And then there is the final detail, recorded by multiple witnesses but never conclusively proven. On certain evenings, just as the last sliver of sun slips below the horizon, the darkness inside the doorway appears to deepen not naturally, but as though something steps back from the threshold. A faint shift, a breath of movement, gone in an instant. Tonight, as the sky bleeds into a dusty violet and the plateau quiets beneath the first touch of night, the doorway stands in its eternal stillness, cut into dusk, waiting for the moment light falters just enough to reveal what lies behind silence. And for a fleeting second, the darkness inside seems to twitch, as though it remembers being watched. Children of the constellations, high on a windswept plain where the stars feel unnervingly close, so close they seem to pulse with each slow breath of the night, lies a scattering of burial mounds unlike any others on record, not because of their shape, not because of their age, but because of the bodies found within, and what they wore upon their skin. The first mound was excavated in 1927, after shepherds reported stones engraved with strange markings exposed by seasonal rains. When archaeologists arrived and brushed away the topsoil, they uncovered a burial chamber lined with smooth slabs of basalt. Not local basalt, this stone came from far away, carried here with a purpose lost to history. At the center of the chamber lay a single skeleton, small, delicately built, the bones positioned with unusual care, as though arranged according to a ritual precise down to the final finger joint. But the detail that stunned the excavation team was not the bones themselves. It was the markings on them. Fine lines, faint but unmistakably deliberate, ran across the rib cage, the arms, the legs. Not carvings, not cut marks. Pigment. Pigment that had survived centuries. Pigment shaped into star patterns, constellations, mapped across the body like a celestial tattoo. When compared with the night sky, the positions matched constellations as they would have appeared thousands of years ago, long before the earliest known star maps of the region. One cluster mirrored Orion, another traced the arc of Cassiopeia. But then came the unsettling discovery. The markings also included constellations that no longer exist, formations broken apart by the slow drift of stars across millennia. skies that belong to a different age of the world. Scholars still debate whether these patterns were artistic interpretations, spiritual symbols, or reflections of a sky genuinely observed by a culture older than expected. Some insist the pigment was added long after the body decomposed, but chemical analysis tells a different story. The markings permeated the bone at a microscopic level applied while the flesh was still intact. As we drift deeper into this haunted plain, lantern light falls upon more burial mounds, each one yielding a similar body, each marked with different constellations, some incomplete, some overlapping, some arranged in spirals, echoing the symbols from the painted cave and the doorway carved into dusk. And then came the most haunting find. In the fourth mound, the skeleton was larger, taller, broader, the proportions subtly different. The star markings here formed a detailed map of the sky, not as it appeared thousands of years ago, but as it will appear thousands of years in the future. A mainstream astronomer, reviewing the patterns, admitted quietly, reluctantly, that the map could represent a projection of stellar drift. But no ancient culture on record possessed the mathematical framework to chart such shifts. No culture except, perhaps, a forgotten one. The bodies wore necklaces of beads carved from meteorite fragments, smooth, metallic, cool to the touch, even under the warmth of a lantern. Each bead was etched with spirals so small and so consistent that they appeared machine-made. Yet they belonged to an age far predating machinery capable of such work. As we noted earlier in the steel that fell from the sky, meteor metals seem to recur across ancient sites, shaped with care, preserved with reverence, incorporated into symbols of unknown meaning. Here, draped across the bodies, the metal felt almost like an identity marker. The children of the constellations, some whispered, a people who marked themselves as belonging to the sky as much as the earth. In the largest mound, a final chamber lay concealed beneath a slab, requiring days of careful excavation. Inside, on a bed of fine sand that still held its shape, lay a small stone tablet engraved with a single symbol, a circle, encircled by 12 smaller points, a star, surrounded by its family. This symbol matched one seen earlier on the metal disc near the preserved glacier bodies, and faintly, almost invisibly, inside the doorway that swallowed sound at dusk. Patterns repeating, threads tightening. Scholars still debate the purpose of these celestial burials. Were they astronomers? Prophets? A priesthood that believed the soul travelled among the stars? Or something stranger, a lineage tracing its origins not to Earth alone, but to the heavens they painted on their skin? One last detail lingers in the cold air of this plain. When researchers brought one of the star-marked bones into a controlled dark room, a faint luminescence appeared, pigment glowing softly in a pattern identical to the night sky overhead. Not bright, not constant, just enough to pulse once, like a distant echo of a memory older than the burial itself. And tonight, under the vast canopy of stars stretching across the wind-swept plain, the mounds feel almost alive, like quiet guardians watching the sky they once believed was home. For in the stillness between breaths, the constellations above and the constellations carved below align for a moment, as though remembering each other. Tower that listened to storms. On a lonely rise where the plains stretch outward in a colourless hush, a single tower stands thin, tall, and impossibly still. It is not grand, it is not ornate, yet it commands the landscape with a quiet, magnetic pull, as though the earth itself grew it upward for a purpose now lost to time. The tower is carved from a single column of stone, its surface smoothed by wind yet never eroded enough to blur its elegant, vertical lines. It rises 40 feet into the air, tapering toward a rounded tip that points not to the sky in reverence, but slightly east, as if listening. It was discovered in formal records in 1898, when a group of meteorological researchers passing through the region noticed their instruments behaving strangely near it. Barometers dipped, needles trembled. Temperatures fluctuated in gentle yet measurable waves. The air around the tower carried a faint static that prickled the skin not harshly, but with the softness of anticipation, like the moment before a summer storm breaks. As they approached, the wind shifted, not in strength, in tone. The breezes around the tower produced a low, harmonic hum, resonating upward through the stone itself. It vibrated faintly beneath the researchers' hands, responding to shifts in weather miles away. Scholars still debate the cause of this resonance. Some suggest it is a natural Aeolian effect, a trick of wind and structure. Others are not so convinced, for the tower does not behave like a natural formation. Its interior, discovered through a narrow slit running vertically from base to apex, is hollow, perfectly hollow, the cavity smooth as polished glass. When lantern light was lowered inside, reflections spiraled upward along the walls, as though guided by invisible channels. Inside the base, small carvings line the inner ring, short repeating strokes that resemble tally marks, but arranged in clusters rather than sequences. To one scholar, they appeared as records markings made to track the number of storms, perhaps, or the arrival of seasonal winds. But the pattern did not match annual cycles. It matched something else entirely. The marks formed a repeating rhythm, a pulse, one that bore uncanny resemblance to the frequencies recorded around the humming metal buried in the desert, the steel that remembered the sky. As we drift in closer, the lantern's glow throws shadows that stretch up the tower's face like fingers reaching toward unseen signals in the clouds. Climbing the tower is forbidden now. A lone ladder once placed against it shuddered violently in sudden gusts that did not touch the surrounding grass. Wind behaves strangely here, curling around the stone with the gentle insistence of a living thing. Local oral tradition speaks of the tower as a listener, a place where ancient sky watchers came not to observe storms visually, but to feel them, to read them, to understand the language of thunder. One particularly old tale claims that the tower once sang with every storm, that its vibrations carried messages, warnings, prophecies, alignments of wind and celestial events carved into the very air. A fringe researcher in the 1960 seconds tested this by placing sensitive microphones around the tower over several months. During a major storm, he recorded something extraordinary. Beneath the roar of winds and distant thunder, a pattern emerged in the tower's vibrations. Not random noise. A sequence, 5 rising tones. A pause, 3 descending. A cadence strikingly similar to the handmark rhythms carved into the drowned road's basin stones. Coincidence? Perhaps. But as we've seen spirals, rhythms, markings, these coincidences keep appearing. Scholars still debate whether the tower was intended as an acoustic oracle, a meteorological instrument, or part of an unknown ritual network spanning multiple ancient sites. But one observation stands firm: the tower reacts not to local weather alone, but to storms far beyond the horizon. During a cyclone hundreds of miles away, the structure reportedly vibrated with such intensity that dust fell from its interior walls like ancient breath. No wind touched the plain around it. As we noted earlier, among the children marked with constellations, some ancient cultures held an understanding of the skies that defies easy categorization. Perhaps this tower was part of that understanding, an antenna to the heavens, a conduit between earth and storm, or a sentinel built to hear something far older than lightning. And then there is the last detail, the one only night reveals. At dusk, as the sky deepens into a bruised violet and the first stars emerge, the tower emits a faint shimmer not visible to all, but unmistakable to those who have seen it, a flicker along its eastern edge, like heat rising from stone. During one rare evening storm, observers claimed the shimmer extended upward, a thin, wavering line reaching toward the clouds. Not lightning, not reflection, something else. And as the storm rolled overhead, the tower answered with a single, soft resonance, a sound so deep it felt like a memory rather than noise. Tonight, in the calm between distant storms, the tower stands alone, listening, as it always has, to the breath of the sky. Road that ignored mountains, high in a rugged expanse where cliffs claw at the sky and ravines split the land into deep, jagged wounds, there lies a road so impossibly straight that it appears to cut through the mountains themselves, not around them, not over them, through them, carved with a certainty that feels almost defiant, as though whoever built it refused to acknowledge the Earth's ancient obstacles. It was rediscovered in 1935, when a team of cartographers mapping a new route for trade caravans noticed something strange on their altitude charts, a perfectly linear drop hidden beneath centuries of rockfall. When they reached the coordinates, they found a narrow opening in the cliff face, Beyond it stretched a corridor carved smooth through solid stone, 20 meters high, and arrow straight as far as lantern light could travel. Not a tunnel, a road, walled on both sides by living mountain, and yet somehow untouched by it. The smoothness of the passage was the first anomaly. The walls bore no chisel marks, no tool scoring, no signs of erosion. Instead, they curved in graceful arcs, as though shaped by a force that removed stone without breaking it, like melted wax solidified into perfect geometry. Some geologists suggested glacial activity, but the symmetry was too precise, the surfaces too polished. As the team traveled deeper, the corridor retained its unbroken straightness, even when the mountain above twisted in wild, chaotic folds. This road did not bend to follow the land. The land seemed to have bent around the road. Scholars still debate how such a feat could be possible in the ancient world. No known civilization possessed the means to cut through kilometers of granite in a straight line. No tools, no techniques, no records. Yet the road exists. As we drift further into its depth, lantern light dances across faint markings near the base of the walls, small indentations, clusters of 3, repeating at intervals too precise to be accidental. Their spacing is identical to carvings found in the stairway that ascended into nothing, a rhythm, a subtle pulse left in stone. At the corridor's midpoint, the explorers encountered the most unsettling feature, a series of alcoves carved into the walls at perfect intervals. Each alcove contained a shallow depression, smooth and bowl-like, as if meant to hold something, or someone, resting briefly along a long and purposeful journey. The depressions were angled slightly upward, facing the corridor's direction with a quiet expectancy. Some compared them to resting stations, others to ceremonial stops in a processional road. But one researcher noted something different. Each alcove aligned with specific astronomical events: a solstice, a lunar nodal crossing, the rising of a star that no longer appears in our night sky. The road was not merely cutting through mountains, it was cutting through time, aligning itself with celestial cycles, as if following instructions written not in the earth, but above it. As we noted earlier in the tower that listened to storms, some ancient structures appear to be tuned not acoustically, but cosmically built to resonate with movements far beyond human reach. This road carries that same haunting precision. At its deepest point, the corridor suddenly widens into a vast chamber, open to the sky, a circular clearing carved in the heart of the mountain. The ceiling above had collapsed long ago, or perhaps was never there. Moonlight spills into the space like water flowing into a stone basin. On the chamber floor lies a mosaic of pale stones arranged in spirals, always spirals, radiating outward from a central point like ripples frozen in time. Some stones are scorched lightly, uniformly, as though once exposed to a controlled, ritual flame. In the center stands a single monolith, short and unadorned, perfectly aligned with the corridor. A mainstream archaeologist suggested it was a marker stone, a waypoint, but the monolith's top surface contains a circular groove, a place where something once rested. The same groove shape found in the moon circle of stones, and upon the pedestal beneath the pyramid's heart, connections tightening. During excavation, researchers discovered that sound behaves strangely in this chamber. A whisper at the center becomes amplified softly, warmly spreading outward in waves that echo down the corridor like breath pushing through a flute. Voices stretch, bend, gain harmonics that do not belong to the speaker. Some believe the road and chamber once formed part of a ritual journey, an initiation path, a pilgrimage, perhaps, walked only during precise celestial alignments. Scholars still debate, yet none can deny the sense of intention embedded in every angle, every curve, every impossible meter of the route. At dusk, when shadows deepen and the wind threads its way through the corridor, the air grows strangely still, not silent, just waiting. And in that waiting, some explorers have felt something else, a subtle vibration beneath their feet, like the memory of footsteps walking the road long after its builders vanished. Tonight, the road lies empty beneath the mountain's dark embrace, straight, silent, perfect. A path that ignored mountains, and perhaps once led to a place still waiting in the unseen distance, where stone gives way to starlight. Sanctuary of the hidden engine, deep in a forested ravine, where the canopy gathers into a ceiling of interlocking green, a mound of earth rises in a shape too regular to be natural, It resembles a simple hill at first glance, rounded, unassuming, carpeted with moss and roots. But when lightning struck its western slope in 1969, the charred gap revealed something far more deliberate beneath the soil. Stone blocks, fitted, aligned, and beneath them, the whisper of mechanisms that had not seen the sun in thousands of years. The excavation began cautiously. As archaeologists removed layers of earth, they uncovered a structure shaped like a circular chamber buried almost completely underground. At its center lay an intricate lattice of stone pillars, arranged in a perfect ring. Each pillar carved with identical grooves, running vertically along their sides. But the strangest element was found beneath the pillars. Hidden in a pit lined with polished slate were the remains of a device fragmented, yet unmistakably engineered. Metal rods, gear-like stones, curved plates bearing spirals etched so finely they seemed to quiver when touched by lamplight. A machine, not intact, not complete, but undeniably purposeful. Mainstream archaeologists insisted the fragments belonged to an elaborate water system, perhaps an irrigation engine or ceremonial pump. Yet the components did not align with any known hydraulic design. The rods were too thin, the plates too delicately balanced, the grooves too numerous and too precise. Scholars still debate what this engine was meant to do. Some claim it once rotated, others believe it vibrated. A few whispered that it hummed, like the alloy fallen from the sky, another artifact that responded to cosmic rhythm. As lantern light reveals the sanctum's walls, we see more patterns recurring, clusters of spirals, sets of 3 indentations, rhythmic markings like those beneath the drowned road. Everywhere we travel in this hidden world, familiar motifs surface again, as if an ancient network wove its signs across continents. The central chamber possesses an eerie quality. Sounds shift unpredictably, amplifying in some corners and dying instantly in others. When one researcher whispered near a fragment of the curved plate, the whisper echoed as though the chamber recognized its tone. As we drift deeper into the ruin, the carved pillars become more intriguing. Each pillar's grooves align perfectly with its neighbors, forming continuous vertical channels that lead upward into nothingness. Some theorists propose that the pillars once supported a rotating structure above, powered by the engine below, but no debris from such a mechanism was found. Instead, beneath the chamber floor, a second layer awaited, a hidden vault, sealed with a slab too heavy for early cultures to have lifted without sophisticated equipment. When researchers finally raised it with modern machinery, they found a small cavity containing a single object, a sphere, smooth, dark, marked with spirals that wrapped around its surface like the path of a wandering planet. The sphere was cool to the touch and oddly heavy. Its material resisted all attempts at identification, but its density suggested a composite unknown in ancient metallurgy. When placed atop one of the broken pillars, the sphere rolled slowly, not outward, but inward toward the exact center of the chamber, as though drawn by an unseen force. This detail troubled the team. The chamber was level, perfectly level, yet the sphere behaved as if responding to a subtle gradient of energy or gravity concentrated at the room's core. A fringe theorist proposed the sphere was once the heart of the engine, a stabilizing component or a focusing node. Mainstream scholars dismissed the claim, but none could explain why the sphere reacted to the chamber's geometry so precisely. As we noted earlier in the map of forgotten shores and the cave of painted skies, some ancient structures appear tuned architecturally or spiritually to natural energies, celestial cycles, or something deeper. Here, in this sanctuary, the sensation intensifies. Team members reported feeling a faint vibration in their palms when touching the pillars. Metal detectors behaved erratically, compasses spun gently, and once, just once late at night when the wind outside was still, the fragments in the central pit produced a soft, resonant chime. It lasted less than a second, barely enough to confirm, barely enough to deny. Scholars still debate whether this was coincidence, or the last breath of something ancient remembering its purpose. Beneath the sanctuary floor, a final discovery rests in dust. A small plate etched with an unfamiliar symbol, a spiral flanked by 2 crescents. The same emblem found faintly on the doorway at dusk, and etched into the meteor steel beneath the desert plain. Connections are no longer whispers, they are threads winding tighter. Tonight, As moonlight filters through the ravine and the forest hums with distant life, the sanctuary sits silent, its engine broken, its purpose forgotten. But the air still carries a faint tension, a sense of expectation, as though the pieces wait for hands that remember how to place them, and a world ready to hear what the engine once said. Circle drawn for the moon. Deep within a windswept plain where grasses move like tides, and the sky stretches in a vast, breathless dome, explorers once came upon a ring of stones so perfectly placed that the earth itself seemed to hold its posture around them. Not towering megaliths, not crude markers, but smooth, elegantly shaped stones arranged in a circle, nearly 60 meters wide, each one angled with uncanny precision toward a single rising point on the horizon. The moon's rising point. It was charted formally in 1924 by an archaeological team studying nomadic routes. From afar, the stones blended into the land like natural formations, but upon closer study, the arrangement revealed purpose, deliberate spacing, measured alignments, and a circular geometry too exact for chance. What puzzled researchers most was the stone's surfaces. Each bore faint carvings, thin spirals, and crescent shapes layered atop one another like a quiet language written in curves. Most were so eroded they were nearly invisible unless seen by lantern light at just the right angle, when the lines caught the glow and glimmered faintly like dew. The circle itself responded to moonlight in a way few expected. During certain phases, the stones reflected the pale glow with surprising intensity. Some illuminated fully, others remained dark. Patterns formed across the circle, shifting with the lunar cycle, as if the arrangement was less a monument and more a calendar, an ancient instrument tuned to the sky. Scholars still debate how such precision was achieved. The culture believed to have inhabited the region at the time left no written records, no architectural legacy suggesting advanced astronomy. Yet, the circle aligned not only with the moon's monthly path, but with its 18.6-year nodal cycle, a movement understood only in much later civilizations. The deeper we drift into the circle's quiet interior, the more details reveal themselves. The ground at the center is unusually smooth, as if thousands of feet once stood here in ceremony, or something heavier pressed down in stillness for ages. Under the topsoil, archaeologists discovered a layer of compacted clay shaped into a shallow basin. The basin held ash mixed with fine mineral dust. A mainstream archaeologist proposed ritual fires, but the ash contained traces of rare metallic particles, minerals also found in the hidden engine beneath the forest ravine and in the heart chamber sealed under the desert pyramid. Again, the thread appears. Near the eastern arc of the circle, a single stone differs from the others. It bears a deep, deliberate groove almost bowl-shaped, angled upward toward the rising moon. When water was poured into the groove during a research experiment, the surface reflected the moonlight with unnerving clarity, focusing it into a single concentrated beam that struck the center of the circle. This phenomenon occurred only during one specific lunar phase, only within a narrow window of minutes, only under a clear sky. The effect was subtle, but unmistakable. A fringe researcher suggested the circle was built not to observe the moon, but to interact with it, using focused light, resonance, or some now forgotten form of lunar ritual. But the strangest discovery came from beneath the central basin. After a small section of clay cracked during excavation, researchers found a stone slab beneath it. The slab bore a symbol carved with exceptional care, a spiral enclosed by two crescents, the same symbol found in the sanctuary of the hidden engine, the same carved faintly inside the doorway cut into dusk, the same pressed into meteor steel hidden beneath the desert. This was no coincidence. This was continuity. Scholars still debate the meaning of the symbol, a cycle of rebirth, perhaps, or a celestial map, or a spiritual anchor connecting earth, sky, and something beyond. Yet the moon circle carries another secret. Sound behaves strangely here. Stand at the exact center and speak, and your voice returns to you in a quiet, wavering echo. Not from the stones, not from the air, but from the ground itself, as if something beneath listens and answers. During one particularly clear night in the late 1972, researchers camped inside the circle to observe the lunar alignment. At the moment, the moonlight struck the central basin through the eastern groove stone, A faint vibration rippled through the earth, not strong, just enough to shiver through the soles of their boots. It lasted only a second, then silence, a deep, expectant silence that felt almost aware. As we noted earlier, among the drowned roads and the storm-listening tower, some ancient sites were built to respond to environmental triggers: light, wind, water, celestial motion. This circle feels like part of that same enigmatic system. Tonight, under a rising moon that bathes the plain in pale silver, the stones stand watch in perfect stillness. But when the moon reaches its peak, the circle seems to breathe, shadows shifting, light pooling, spirals softly glowing as though remembering a purpose nearly forgotten. For a brief moment, the air feels charged, attentive, poised, as if the circle waits for something not yet rediscovered, a ritual, a presence, or a single missing piece. The night deepens, and the moon's cold light lingers within the circle, like a whisper held in stone, pages buried twice. In a lonely stretch of steppe where the wind moves like an old storyteller, slow, deliberate, unwilling to reveal everything at once, archaeologists once uncovered a burial unlike any they expected. Not the resting place of a ruler, not a tomb of treasures, but a grave filled with pages. Pages that had been buried twice. The first discovery came in 1939, when shepherds noticed parchment fragments exposed after a violent gust tore open a shallow patch of earth. The fragments were brittle, cracked, and so darkened with age that at first they resembled pieces of bark. But when the light struck them, faint lines emerged, ink strokes, carefully drawn, forming symbols almost too fine for the naked eye. An excavation soon began. What they found deepened the mystery. 10 feet beneath the surface lay a weathered stone box. Inside that box rested an older container carved from hardened clay, sealed, bound with pitch, wrapped in layers of fiber that crumbled at the slightest touch. A page, inside a container, inside another container, inside the earth, buried twice, protected twice, hidden with an insistence that suggested secrecy, reverence, or fear. Scholars still debate which. When the layers were finally parted, a small collection of pages revealed themselves, thin sheets, pressed from an unknown plant fiber. They were astonishingly intact, their ink faint but legible in places. But it wasn't the content that troubled researchers most. It was the condition of the pages. Half of them showed signs of burial soil stains, insect damage, the brittle texture of something that had once decayed. And the other half? Pristine, dry, as though they had never touched the earth until the day they were uncovered. How can half a bundle age thousands of years, and the rest remain untouched? As we drift deeper into the excavation trench, lantern light reveals more oddities. The clean pages contain spirals and intersecting lines, extremely similar to the markings found in the lost language tablets and the moon circle carvings. The aged pages contain writing of another kind, flowing, curved lines, like early script, but belonging to no known linguistic family. 2 writing systems, 2 sets of symbols, 2 ages of ink, on the same pages. A mainstream linguist suggested the pristine pages might have been preserved by unusual climate conditions, but he could not explain why the aged ones contained faint impressions of the spirals like ghosts of symbols that were later redrawn on the preserved sheets with greater precision. It was as though someone tried to copy the spirals, but the originals had already begun to disappear. Beneath the stack of pages, researchers found a thin metal sheet, circular, smooth, etched with near-invisible lines. The design resembled the discs found with the glacier bodies and the sanctum engine fragments. But here, it was smaller, personal, like a key or a guide for understanding the pages above it. When placed under strong light, the disc projected faint reflections across the pages, aligning with certain spirals, igniting patterns that seemed random until they overlapped perfectly. The disc wasn't decorative. It was a decoding tool, as we noted earlier in the silent library carved into stone. Some ancient cultures recorded knowledge in ways that blurred the line between text and geometry, knowledge that could only be unlocked when light hit it from a specific angle or when the pages were viewed in a particular sequence. These pages were no exception. One page held a symbol that chilled the excavation team, a circle surrounded by radiating lines, identical to the solar mark found in the star burial mounds, and nearly identical to the spiral crescent emblem beneath the pyramid. The deeper the dig went, the stranger the context became. Underneath the double burial box lay a patch of soil unnaturally compacted, as though something once rested there. Tests revealed microscopic traces of ash, but not plant ash, mineral ash, ash with the same composition as the ancient ember from the flame that would not fade. Something burned here, something important, and the pages were buried above the ashes, as though sealing something away or protecting something from being lost entirely. Scholars still debate whether the double burial was an attempt to preserve knowledge or to hide it. The final and most haunting discovery came from the edges of the outer stone container. Scratched faintly into the inner rim were tiny characters, not the flowing script of the old pages, not the spirals of the pristine ones, but something else. 3 repeated markings, 3 tiny indentations, arranged in a rhythmic pattern, the same pulse carved into the drowned roads, the same rhythm embedded in the tower that listened to storms, the same sequence etched inside the sanctuary pillars. The pages contained more than writing, they contained echoes, and as researchers packed away the fragile sheets, one page fluttered unexpectedly, despite the windless air tilting just enough for lantern light to pass across its surface. For a single instant, the ink glowed, soft, pale, almost like moonlight remembering itself. Then the glow faded, and the page lay still. Tonight, those buried pages rest in a vault, half living, half dead, as though caught between 2 ages, 2 authors, 2 truths, and perhaps 2 worlds. River of stone below. There is a canyon in the far north where the air hangs heavy with silence, as though the land itself has forgotten how to speak. Snow gathers in thin veils along its ridges, melting only in narrow streaks that shimmer like silver threads. But beneath this quiet landscape, hidden under a crust of brittle earth and permafrost, lies a river, not of water, not of ice, but of stone. It was discovered in 1966 when a mining team drilling exploratory shafts heard something unusual, an echo, not the dull, muted echo of solid rock, but a clear, resonant, almost metallic return, as though their drill bit had struck hollow ground far below. When they widened the shaft and lowered a lantern, the light vanished into a space so deep and so geometrically smooth that the men hesitated to descend. But curiosity won, as it always does, and when the first explorer reached the cavern floor, he found himself standing on what the world would soon call the River of Stone, a long, continuous channel, flowing like a river, but carved entirely from polished basalt, snaked beneath the canyon in impossible perfection. The surface was smooth enough to reflect lamplight in rippling bands, and though there was no water, no moisture, the channel had unmistakable fluid curves, as if shaped by currents that had never been liquid. Scholars still debate how such a formation could exist. No natural process carves stone into seamless, sinuous pathways, without cracks or debris. No glacier, no lava flow, no known erosion matches its elegance. This was not nature, this was architecture. We follow the lantern deeper, into places where the air grows colder and the silence thickens. Along the walls, faint chisel-less markings twist upward in spirals, always spirals. But these are tighter, more mathematical, almost like the diagrammatic pathways found on the deciphering disk buried with the pages that had been buried twice. The river's edges hold shallow indentations, spaced at consistent intervals, like steps made for someone with a gait slightly longer than human. A mainstream anthropologist suggested these were maintenance footholds for whoever carved the channel, but others noted that the indentations were arranged not horizontally, but according to an invisible cadence, as though following a rhythm instead of practicality. Further downstream, or rather, further along the stone flow, the explorers found something even more perplexing. A stone bridge, a perfect arch spanning the width of the channel, carved from the same black basalt. But the bridge connected nothing to nothing. No tunnels, no passages, just a lone structure stretching over a stone river that never carried water. And atop the bridge, they found the object that deepened the mystery. A slab, thin, rectangular, heavy, etched with a constellation map. But not our constellations, not fully. Half the map matched the sky above the canyon as it appeared 6,000 years ago. The other half showed stars positioned as they would be thousands of years in the future, past and future, pressed into a single stone. As we noted earlier in the celestial burials, the children of the constellations, some ancient groups seem to mark time not as a line, but as a cycle. Here, that cycle wraps around us like a cold breath. Beneath the bridge, another discovery waited. A groove, subtle, narrow, ran down the center of the stone river, almost like the guide track of a mechanism. At several points, the groove widened into circular depressions, each bearing faint scorch marks identical to those found near the drowned road's platform and the hidden engine's broken components. Something had once moved along this channel, something that generated heat, something guided by the groove's unwavering path. Scholars still debate the purpose of that mechanism. Was it a ritual cart, a stone-born instrument, or an engine like the shattered one beneath the ravine traveling along a subterranean route that connected distant sites? Within one of the circular depressions, archaeologists found tiny fragments of metal, barely more than dust. But analysis revealed an alloy with meteoric composition, matching the sky-fallen steel that hummed in the desert. The links tighten. The deeper the team traveled, the clearer it became. The river was not merely a passage. It was a system, a conduit. At the farthest point reached before the expedition was halted due to instability, the stone channel widened into a vast chamber. Light from the lantern spilled across its floor and revealed a final, chilling detail. The chamber ended abruptly at a cliff, a sheer drop into darkness so profound that not even dropped stones produced an audible return. A river, flowing into an abyss. Some fringe researchers claim that the abyss may lead to deeper chambers, or perhaps another branch of the stone river in a different region. Others whisper that the drop might have once been connected to an underground engine or resonance chamber now collapsed. Scholars still debate, but one detail remains consistent across all accounts. When explorers stood near the edge, the air seemed to pulse, softly at first, then stronger, in harmony with the same three-beat rhythm etched into monuments across continents. Tonight, as frost gathers on the canyon rim and the wind howls above, the stone river sleeps beneath it, smooth, silent, waiting, a frozen flow carved not by nature, but by intent, into depths the world has yet to understand. Face, from the wrong land. The desert wind carries a strange quiet across the plateau, where this discovery was made, an emptiness so complete that even the sand seems reluctant to shift. Travelers crossing this region often describe an inexplicable sense of being watched, though the land is barren for miles in every direction. But in 1958, during a routine geological survey, that feeling found its source. A face, not carved into a monument, not molded into pottery, but sculpted into stone unlike any found in this part of the world, half buried in the sand, staring upward with an expression too foreign to belong here. The stone was smooth, pale, and veined with minerals that did not exist anywhere within hundreds of kilometers. When researchers excavated fully, they uncovered a full head, an intricately carved bust of a figure with elongated features, high cheekbones, and a crown-like band of spirals encircling the brow. It was unmistakably not local. In fact, it matched the artistry of a culture thousands of miles away. Scholars still debate how such a sculpture ended up here, in a region that shows no evidence of long-distance trade or migration during the era in which the stone was dated. The bust predated nearby settlements by millennia. Its style echoed motifs from a culture across an ocean. Its composition matched stone quarried in a land known for volcanic activity, not desert dunes. As we drift closer, lantern light reveals details carved with impossible skill. The eyes are slightly almond-shaped, set deep as though observing something distant. The lips curve in a faint, enigmatic smile, one that does not resemble any known sculpting tradition of the local peoples. And circling the forehead, the spirals twist inward in the same pattern found on the drowned road's metallic ring, the buried pages etched symbols, and the heartstone beneath the pyramid. The spirals again, always returning. More startling still was the discovery beneath the bust. Archaeologists found that the head rested atop a platform of stone blocks arranged in a perfect star shape, 5 points, each oriented to a cardinal direction, but the star was misaligned, slightly rotated, not matching the orientation of this landscape at all. Instead, it matched the alignment of constellations visible from the culture believed to have crafted the bust. As if the statue had been placed here according to a sky not of this land, Scholars still debate whether this indicates migration, trade, or something far stranger, an ancient attempt to transplant celestial traditions across continents. Nearby, buried under a thin crust of sand, researchers discovered fragments of pottery, but the fragments were decorated with symbols entirely foreign to the region, looping strokes and dotted clusters identical to markings found on the lost language tablets recovered from the dry riverbed, pieces of a story scattered far apart, yet synchronizing like distant echoes. Among the pottery shards were two objects that deepened the mystery. The first, a small obsidian bead, polished into a perfect sphere, bearing 3 shallow grooves, exactly the same spacing as the rhythmic depressions carved into the stone river below the northern canyon. The second, a thin disc of hammered copper, badly weathered, but with one symbol still visible, a spiral wrapped in 2 crescents. Again, the same emblem. This repeated appearance troubled the excavation team. How could identical symbols, materials, and artistic motifs appear across civilizations, separated by oceans, mountains, and eras? Coincidence? Cultural diffusion? Or something older tying them all together? A mainstream archaeologist proposed a migration theory that a small group carried their symbols and artistry across vast distances long before recorded history. But this explanation buckled when radiocarbon testing of sediment layers revealed the bust predated known migration by thousands of years. A fringe theorist suggested something more dramatic, that the bust was intentionally placed here as part of a global network of markers, land anchors representing celestial knowledge, points on the earth mirroring points in the sky. As we noted earlier in the circle drawn for the moon, ancient peoples sometimes aligned their structures with the heavens in ways we still struggle to comprehend. Perhaps this bust was not a portrait, but a compass, a witness, a sentinel placed at a point where sky and land once intersected with extraordinary meaning. And then came the most unsettling detail. On the underside of the bust, hidden until it was fully lifted, carvers had etched a map. A simple one, a crude one, just a series of spirals and lines. But when compared to the star map found on the bridge over the Stone River, the patterns matched almost perfectly. Not a face misplaced, not an artifact lost, a marker, a coordinate, a single piece of a system stretching across continents, one that modern researchers have only begun to glimpse. At sunset, when the desert sky turns amber, the bust's features seem to shift subtly, shadows deepening around the eyes, the spirals along the brow catching faint glimmers of light, and those standing near the star-shaped platform often report a sensation carried through the soles of their feet. A soft hum, a low vibration, like a memory stirring within the earth. Tonight, the bust lies quiet, half lit by the lingering glow of dusk, its foreign gaze fixed on a horizon it was never meant to see, a face from the wrong land, but perhaps placed in exactly the right place, room-tuned to echoes. In the foothills, where the land folds into gentle rises and shallow valleys, there stands an ancient structure long mistaken for a collapsed granary. From the outside, it appears unremarkable, just a squat, square building made of weather-worn stone blocks, no grand carvings, no ornate pillars. Only a single doorway, dark and narrow, leaning slightly as if tired of standing guard through centuries. But inside, the room reveals its true nature. It was rediscovered in 1941, when a pair of historians seeking shelter from an unexpected storm ducked through the doorway. They lit a lantern, expecting to find dust and ruin. Instead, they found a chamber carved with such calculated purpose that even the air felt shaped. The room was nearly perfect in proportion, 4 walls, a domed ceiling, and a floor made of polished slabs that reflected the lantern's glow like quiet water. But the most unsettling detail revealed itself not through sight, but sound. When one of the historians spoke, his voice did not behave properly. It didn't echo, it didn't fade, it lingered soft, stretched, alive, gliding across the room like a note held too long by an unseen singer. And when his companion took a step forward, the footfall multiplied, not outward, but inward, amplified softly at the center of the chamber, before fading into a warm hum. This was no storage room. It was an instrument. As we drift into the center, lantern light tracing the curves of the ceiling, we notice the subtle architectural choices. The walls tilt inward by fractions of a degree, the ceiling's dome is slightly asymmetric, and shallow grooves run horizontally along the upper reaches of the room, barely visible, but unmistakably intentional. Sound engineers who later studied the chamber were astonished. Its acoustics responded to specific frequencies, as though tuned to amplify certain tones and swallow others. A whisper in one corner becomes a lingering memory in the air. A clap near the doorway dies instantly, and beneath it all, there is a faint, rhythmic pulse, one that matches the same 3-beat cadence found in the Stone River's grooves and the Drowned Road's basin. Scholars still debate what the room was used for. A ritual hall, a meditation chamber, a communication chamber, or something older, something designed to interact with sound in a way modern understanding can barely articulate. On the western wall, faint markings curl like smoke spirals and short strokes arranged in clusters. Their placement matches the rhythm of the room's echoes, as though the carvings were instructions for how to play the chamber. When a low humming tone was produced using a tuning instrument in the 1970 seconds, the spirals vibrated with a soft trembling, dust falling from them like old breath. Some researchers insist this vibration was coincidence, air movement, resonance, temperature fluctuation. Others are not convinced. In the center of the floor lies a circular depression, smooth, shallow, the exact diameter of the mysterious sphere found in the sanctuary of the hidden engine. When a replica sphere was placed in the depression, sound behavior changed dramatically. Echoes sharpened, resonance deepened, and voices became directional, as though the room was focusing sound toward a point just above the sphere. It was then that some theorists proposed a radical idea. The room was designed not only to amplify sound, but to transmit it, to send it somewhere, or to something far beyond its walls. As we noted earlier in the tower that listened to storms and the stairway that rose toward nothing, certain ancient structures seem built to interact with elements not entirely physical: sound, light, vibration, sky. This room may have been part of that same silent network, but the most unsettling discovery came from a small alcove hidden behind a false wall. Within it lay a stone tablet, smooth, featureless, except for a single carved symbol, a spiral flanked by 2 crescents, the same emblem repeating across continents, the same mark appearing in places as distant as the meteor steel slab and the moon circle. The emblem was carved deeper here, as though meant to endure as long as the room itself, and below it, barely visible, were 3 tiny depressions arranged in the familiar rhythm. On nights when the wind moved softly across the hillside, locals claimed to hear faint tones drifting from the chamber, low hums, gentle pulses, echoes of echoes. Researchers dismiss these reports. The building is sealed now, protected from damage, its interior disturbed only by controlled studies. Yet the stories persist, and tonight, standing at the chamber's threshold, the air feels taut, as if something within waits for the right sound, the right voice, the right frequency, to wake whatever memory the room was built to hold. The echoes inside remain patient, suspended in the thick stillness, like breath waiting to exhale. The day, the calendar ended. In a rugged valley carved by ancient winds, where the hills rise in quiet rolls like the backs of slumbering giants, researchers once uncovered a monument so precise and so haunting that it unsettled even the most seasoned archaeologists. Not because of its age, not because of its construction, but because of what it measured and where it stopped. It was found in 1933, exposed after a rare flash flood tore away sediment and revealed a semicircular arrangement of tall, thin stones. The stones stood like teeth in the earth, each one angled with care, each bearing faint markings worn nearly smooth by centuries of weather. They formed a calendar, a vast one, a celestial one. Unlike the lunar circles used by pastoral cultures or the solstice stones found in other ancient sites, this calendar was not a simple seasonal tool. It tracked celestial cycles with a complexity far beyond anything expected for the region. Solar arcs, lunar nodes, planetary risings, even precession, the slow, ancient wobble of Earth's axis. But the most unsettling detail was that the calendar ended, abruptly, deliberately. As we drift closer, lantern light catches the tallest stone, its face carved with spirals, crescents, and clustered dots arranged in clear cycles. But the cycles halt at a precise point, a point corresponding to a date thousands of years in the past. a date that no known event marks, a date with no flood, no famine, no war, no migration. Scholars still debate why the makers stopped the calendar here. Some suggest the carvers ran out of space, but the remaining stones stand blank, untouched, waiting for continuity that never came. It was as though the builders knew something would end, or believed something would begin, on a day long forgotten. The valley itself reinforces the mystery. When the stones are viewed from above, their arrangement forms an arc, one that mirrors the precise curvature of a celestial horizon. Surveyors then discovered deeper channels carved into the earth behind the main stones, hidden beneath layers of soil. These channels align with star positions not of the past, but of the future, as if the monument was designed to track time forward and back, a cosmic cycle carved into land. Inside one of the deeper channels, archaeologists found a small stone disc, cracked, weathered, yet unmistakably crafted. Etched upon it were the same 3 rhythmic depressions seen across other sites: the drowned road, the river of stone below, the sanctuary engine, the carved echo chamber. Here, too, the pulse appears. Consistent, deliberate, unavoidable. On the underside of another slab rested a series of markings resembling numbers, though not in any known base. Their pattern reflected astronomical cycles stretching far forward, and then halting at the same point as the larger stones. Why end a calendar thousands of years early? Why carve a limit into eternity? One theory emerged from comparing these stones with the star burial mounds of the children of the constellations. A scholar noted that the halted calendar matched a shift in the night sky, the disappearance of a particular constellation from the visible hemisphere. A constellation also found inked across one of the star-marked skeletons, a memory marking the sky, or a warning marking time. And then came the discovery that deepened the enigma. During a rare alignment in the 1970 seconds, when the solstice sun set along the valley's natural axis, the tallest stone cast a perfect, razor-thin shadow, cutting across the semicircle and landing precisely on the last marked date. As the sun dipped lower, the shadow trembled, wavered, and for a moment glowed faintly. The effect was caused by sunlight refracting through mineral inclusions in the stone, researchers explained. But those mineral lenses were placed intentionally tiny crystals embedded in the stone like seeds of light. Crystals also found in the carved painting cave deeper west. Crystals also packed into the roots of the woven forest kingdom. Crystals also coating the garments of the frozen bodies preserved in the glacier. Each discovery echoes another. Each thread tightens. Scholars still debate whether the calendar commemorated a forgotten celestial event, a cultural prophecy, or an astronomical cycle now obscured by time. But one final clue did not fit neatly into any theory. Below the farthest stone, beneath layers of compacted earth and ancient dust, the excavation team uncovered another slab. Smooth, unmarked, except for a single symbol carved deep into its center, a spiral, enclosed by 2 crescents, with a single line cutting through its heart, the same emblem etched beneath pyramids, inside echo chambers, beneath drowned roads, and on objects that fell from the sky. This calendar did not merely track time. It pointed to a moment, a turning, an ending, or a beginning. And tonight, as the last light fades across the valley and the stones cast long shadows across the cold earth, the semicircle feels less like a ruin and more like a clock. A giant, silent clock whose final tick was carved thousands of years before the world understood what it meant. For in the stillness between dusk and night, the stones feel watchful, as if waiting for the sky to reach that missing moment once more. Eyes waiting for the sky, atop a windswept ridge where the air thins into a pale, breathless whisper. A cluster of stone figures stands half buried in frost, silent, patient, and staring eternally upward. No inscriptions mark their bases, no tools or relics surround them, just a ring of statues carved with unsettling precision, each one gazing toward a single fixed point in the heavens, as if waiting for something that never came. They were discovered in 1952 when a mountaineering team deviated from their planned route in search of shelter. One climber slipped on loose shale and landed beside what he thought was a pillar of rock. But when he brushed away the ice, a carved cheek emerged. A nose, a face raised toward the sky in an expression of awe or warning. They soon realized it wasn't alone. 14 figures formed a semicircle along the ridge, each with elongated features reminiscent of the foreign-faced bust from the distant desert, yet distinct in style. Their eyes, carved deep and shadowed, were angled toward the same patch of sky, a position that matched no cultural star tradition of the region. No solstice, no equinox, no known constellation. Not anymore. Scholars still debate what they were watching. Some suggest the figures once pointed toward a star that has since shifted or faded from view due to precession. Others argue they mark the appearance of a comet or celestial visitor long lost to time. But the angle of their gaze remains unsettlingly precise, far too uniform to be symbolic alone. As we drift among them, lantern light casting long, trembling shadows across the frost, we notice fine incisions on their faces, tiny spirals carved into the temples, barely visible beneath centuries of wind scouring. The same spirals from the drowned roads, the buried pages, the stone river, the chamber of echoes, a pattern stretching across continents, now carved into the heads of watchers facing the cold sky. But the deeper mystery lies beneath their feet. An early excavation revealed a shallow trench beneath each statue. Inside these trenches rested thin sheets of stone, triangular, smooth, engraved with unfamiliar symbols that resembled star maps. But the maps were impossible. They depicted constellations visible only from latitudes far to the south, and others best seen from the far north. A sky stitched together from vantage points no single place on Earth shares. A sky seen from nowhere, or everywhere. The stones were arranged in sequences, 14 sequences, one beneath each figure. When laid out together, the engravings formed a kind of celestial migration, stars shifting gradually across the sky, sliding along curved paths that stretched beyond known cycles. It resembled not a map, but a prediction. As we noted earlier in the day, the calendar ended. Some ancient structures capture time not as a line, but as a turning marking celestial events yet to come. These sky-watching statues may share that purpose. A strange acoustic effect surrounds them. When the wind passes between the figures, it produces tones soft, harmonic, almost like a distant chorus. Local shepherds once claimed the ridge sang during winter nights. Recordings captured in modern times reveal faint intervals resembling those produced by the room tuned to echoes. Different structures, same frequencies. Scholars still debate whether this effect is intentional. Wind interacting with stone can produce eerie sounds naturally, but the tones here repeat the same 3-beat rhythm found in the hidden engine's pillars and the drowned road's platform. Coincidence feels increasingly fragile in the face of such patterns. One detail unsettled the excavation team most. When researchers stood in the exact center of the semicircle where the statue's gazes converge, they felt a slight pressure, a subtle heaviness in the chest. Compass needles spun, audio equipment malfunctioned, and for a moment, the air seemed to pulse with a quiet, slow heartbeat. A fringe theorist suggested the ridge was once used to observe a celestial phenomenon that emitted not just light, but some form of energy, something that resonated with stone, sound, and perhaps even consciousness. Some cultures believed the sky spoke through signs. Others believed the earth answered. Here, on this silent ridge, the watchers seemed caught in the middle of that ancient conversation, waiting for the moment sky and land aligned. The final discovery came from the smallest statue, one nearly toppled by centuries of frost heaving. Carved beneath its chin, hidden until recently, was a single emblem, a spiral, flanked by 2 crescents, the same mark that binds the drowned roads, the silent towers, the hidden engines, the glacier bodies, the carved pages, and the lunar circle, a mark that does not belong to a single culture, a mark that belongs to a system. Tonight, as the wind rises and starlight trembles across the ridge, the stone faces appear almost restless, eyes carved in readiness, gazes fixed on invisible arrival, waiting for something in the sky that once commanded absolute devotion, and perhaps still does. Archway that sighs at night. At the far end of an abandoned causeway, where the land crumbles into cliffs overlooking a restless sea, stands an archway carved from stone so dark it seems to drink the twilight. It rises alone, no ruins beside it, no walls to support, no path that leads through, just a solitary arch, weathered by centuries yet somehow untouched, as if time itself chose to move gently around it. Fishermen once swore the arch breathed, that on certain nights, when the wind shifted and the tide pulled low, A soft sigh drifted from its hollow center, a sound neither entirely natural nor entirely alive. Most dismissed it as the moan of wind through rock. But in 1962, when a coastal geologist visited the site to survey erosion patterns, he heard it too. A quiet exhale passing through stone, steady enough to be rhythmic, steady enough to be intentional. The arch stands nearly 4 meters tall, broad enough for a wagon, carved from a single monolithic block. Its inner curve bears shallow inscriptions, spirals, crescents, and lines like the faint scratches of a forgotten script. But the stone is dense, metallic in places, with streaks of mineral unlike any in the surrounding cliffs. As we drift closer, lantern light glides across its surface, catching on tiny grooves arranged in patterns that echo the same rhythm found beneath the lost river of stone and the sanctuary's pillars. 3 depressions, a pause, 3 more. The cadence of a pulse. Scholars still debate the archway's origin. Nothing else nearby suggests a settlement. No tools, no pottery, no remnants of pathways. And yet the arch is perfectly placed, framed against a horizon where the sun sets directly through its center twice each year. On those evenings, the arch glows in a way that unsettles even the most skeptical observers. It was during one such sunset that archaeologists noticed something extraordinary. As the last rays of the sun passed through the arch, the stone emitted a low, resonant hum so faint it was felt more than heard. Sand trembled at their feet, loose pebbles shifted, and a breeze, warm and inexplicable, drifted outward from the arch's empty frame, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and something older, something like warm iron. The geologist documented the phenomenon, but measuring instruments captured nothing. No seismic activity. No magnetic shifts, no temperature spike, just silence, and the lingering, unexplainable memory of a sigh. On closer examination, the team discovered a peculiar detail. The base of the arch wasn't carved into the cliffside as previously assumed. It rested atop a slab, perfectly rectangular, polished smooth, resting on tiny supports no thicker than a thumb. The arch wasn't anchored, it was placed, and beneath the slab, when sand was carefully brushed away, archaeologists found a shallow cavity packed with fine sediment, unlike the local soil. Under ultraviolet light, the sediment shimmered faintly, the same mineral dust found in the lunar circle's basin, the same dust found in the burial mound of the children of the constellations. Connections winding tighter, inside the cavity lay a final clue. A small stone node shaped like a seed, smooth, dark, heavy, marked with a spiral flanked by 2 crescents. The emblem again. As we noted earlier, across the continent-spanning trail of symbols beneath deserts, inside glaciers, carved into towers and chambers, this mark is no longer a curiosity. It is a signature. But the arch holds one more secret, revealed only when the sea is calm. Late one night, during low tide in 1974, a researcher placed her ear gently against the arch's inner curve. She reported hearing more than a sigh. She heard a whisper, a faint vibration shaped almost like a voice. Not words, not language, just the shape of sound rising and falling in a cadence reminiscent of the echo chamber's pulses. Her colleagues dismissed it as auditory pareidolia, but others whispered that the arch was once part of a chain, a relay in an ancient system of sound, light, and resonance that stretched across forgotten geographies. A doorway not to rooms, but to frequencies. On stormless nights, when the sea settles into a glassy calm and moonlight spills through the stone like melted silver, locals claim the arch sighs once, softly, wistfully, as though remembering something it was built to do, something it has not been asked to do in thousands of years. Tonight, as the lantern flickers and the sea hushes its restless breath, the arch stands silent, but not empty. Its dark frame feels watchful, waiting, tuned to a signal or a cycle long out of reach. And when the wind finally moves, the arch exhales, a quiet, ancient sigh that drifts into the night like the last note of a memory too old to name. Conclusion. Night settles across the scattered ruins and silent thresholds we have wandered together, over drowned roads, humming stones, frozen bodies, and the long, patient breath of forgotten chambers. Across continents and centuries, the same quiet symbols returned like echoes, spirals, crescents, rhythms carved into earth and memory. They threaded through mountains and deserts, through sky-watching statues and the stone river that flowed without water, whispering that none of these mysteries were ever truly alone. And now, as the dark gathers softly around the last remnants of these ancient worlds, a single truth lingers in the stillness, that whatever moved these builders, whatever guided their hands across impossible distances, left its mark everywhere, in stone, in sound, in light, and in us. Perhaps the past is not gone. Perhaps it only sleeps, listening, waiting for the sky to turn once more. And in the hush of this final moment, the earth feels almost ready to remember.